The cafe fell silent the moment she walked in. Not the comfortable quiet of contentment, but the sharp, suffocating hush of judgment. Mara Ellison stood frozen in the doorway, her fingers instinctively rising to adjust the silk scarf wrapped around the lower half of her face, the wide-brimmed hat pulled low over her forehead. She'd made a mistake coming here. She could feel it in every pair of eyes that flickered toward her, then deliberately away, as if her presence was something obscene, something that shouldn't be acknowledged in polite company. Whispers rippled through the crowded space like poison spreading through water. A mother pulled her child closer. A businessman's lip curled in poorly disguised disgust. Mara's breath caught, shame burning hotter than the fire that had scarred her skin 3 years ago. She turned to leave, to retreat back into the safety of shadows where people like her belonged. And then someone stood up. If you want to know what happens when one broken person refuses to look away from another, stay with me until the end of this story. And if this reaches you, hit that like button and comment your city below. I want to see how far Mara and Ethan's story can travel. The man who stood wasn't remarkable at first glance. Ethan Brooks was 34, though the lines around his eyes suggested a harder journey than his years warranted. His jacket was worn at the elbows, his jeans faded from too many washes, and his sneakers had seen better days, probably several years ago. He was the kind of person most people in this upscale cafe wouldn't notice, the kind whose presence registered as background noise, if it registered at all. But he was looking directly at Mara, and he was walking toward her. Panic flared in her chest. She knew this pattern. Sometimes disgust needed to get closer to really see what it was judging. Sometimes cruelty wore a concerned expression right up until it struck. Her hand tightened on the door handle, every muscle tensing for flight. "Excuse me," Ethan said, his voice quiet but steady. He stopped about 3 feet away, close enough to speak without raising his voice, far enough to give her space. "I know this is probably weird, but I just wanted to say, you have really kind eyes." Mara blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Your eyes," he repeated, meeting her gaze without flinching, without that telltale flicker down to where her scarf concealed the ruined landscape of her face. "They're kind. I noticed when you came in. I thought you should know that someone saw that today." The words landed like stones thrown into still water, sending ripples through something in her chest that had been frozen for so long she'd forgotten it could move. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Behind Ethan, the cafe was still staring, but the quality of their attention had shifted. Confusion replacing contempt, curiosity replacing judgment. "I'm Ethan," he continued, and then he did something that made Mara's world tilt sideways. He extended his hand. Not for a handshake exactly, more like an offering. "Would you like to sit down? I'm here with my daughter, and we have an extra chair." Mara looked at his hand like it was a foreign object, something from a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Human touch, connection without condition, the possibility of existing in public space without apology. Her voice cracked, unused and uncertain. "I don't want to intrude." "You wouldn't be," Ethan said simply. "Lily would actually love it. She's 6, and she's convinced that every stranger is a potential friend. I'm trying to teach her to be more cautious, but honestly, I hope I fail. The world needs more people like her." Almost against her will, Mara's gaze shifted to the table he'd come from. A little girl with dark curls and bright, curious eyes was watching them with the unguarded interest of childhood. When she saw Mara looking, she waved with the enthusiasm of someone greeting a long-lost relative. "That's Lily," Ethan said, and the warmth in his voice could have melted steel. "She's the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I do everything, really." There was a story in those words, a depth of meaning that suggested complicated history and hard-won devotion. Mara recognized the tone because she understood what it meant to have your identity rewritten by trauma, to become a person defined entirely by survival. "I should go," she said, but her feet didn't move. "You could," Ethan agreed, "but you came here for a reason, didn't you? Maybe coffee, maybe just to be around people for a while." "I'm guessing it took courage to walk through that door. Seems like a shame to waste that courage." The observation was so accurate, it felt like exposure. Mara's apartment, the expensive, empty penthouse her father had bought to keep her comfortable in her exile, had been suffocating her for weeks. The silence had weight there, pressing down until she couldn't breathe. She'd come to this cafe as an experiment, a test to see if she could still exist in the world, or if 3 years of hiding had erased her citizenship in the land of the living. She'd expected rejection. She'd prepared for cruelty. She had not prepared for kindness. "Daddy!" Lily's voice carried across the cafe with the clarity of a bell. "Is the lady coming to sit with us?" Ethan's expression shifted into something between amusement and resignation. That's my cue to either follow through or explain to a 6-year-old why promises have fine print. He looked at Mara with a question in his eyes that wasn't really about coffee or chairs. It was asking something deeper. "Do you want to try being human again?" Mara's fingers loosened on the door handle. Against every instinct for self-preservation, against 3 years of learned behavior, she nodded. The smile that broke across Ethan's face was like sunrise, slow, genuine, and warm enough to chase away shadows. He gestured toward his table, not touching her, not crowding her space, just indicating the way. As Mara walked through the cafe, she felt the weight of every stare, heard the resumed whispers. But for the first time in years, those things felt less like judgment and more like noise, background static that couldn't touch the fragile, precious thing happening in the space between one step and the next. Lily was practically vibrating with excitement by the time they reached the table. "Hi, I'm Lily Brooks, and I'm 6 years old, and I go to Jefferson Elementary, and my favorite color is purple, and I like butterflies. What's your name?" "Lily," Ethan said gently, pulling out a chair for Mara. "Remember what we talked about? Let people breathe between questions." "Sorry," Lily said, not sounding sorry at all. Her eyes were fixed on Mara with the kind of unfiltered interest that adults had learned to disguise, but children never bothered to. "I like your hat. Is it because you like hats or because of your face?" "Lily," Ethan's voice sharpened with mortification. "That's not... We don't ask." "It's okay," Mara heard herself say, surprising them both. She lowered herself into the chair, her movements careful, controlled. "It's because of my face." Lily nodded, as if this was the most natural answer in the world. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore," Mara said. "Not the way you mean." "Oh." Lily considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "Daddy says that sometimes things hurt on the inside even when they look okay on the outside. Is it like that?" Ethan had gone very still, his expression caught between wanting to intervene and recognizing that something important was happening. Mara met his eyes across the table, saw the apology there, the concern. She gave him the smallest shake of her head. "It's all right." "Yes," she told Lily. "It's exactly like that." I'm sorry you hurt," Lily said with the simple compassion that children possessed before the world taught them to complicate empathy. "Do you want some of my hot chocolate? Daddy says hot chocolate makes everything a little better." Mara felt something crack in her chest, a fissure in the armor she'd built from shame and isolation. "That's very kind of you," she managed, "but I think I'll get my own. What's your name?" "She already told you," Lily said, giggling. "Lily Brooks, weren't you listening?" "I'm sorry," Mara said, and she was smiling beneath her scarf, actually smiling for the first time in so long it felt like relearning a language. "You're right. I'm Mara. It's nice to meet you, Lily Brooks." "Mara," Lily repeated, tasting the name. "That's pretty. Can I see your face?" The question hung in the air like a detonation waiting to happen. Ethan's hand moved toward his daughter, probably to redirect her attention, to apologize, to do whatever damage control was necessary. But Mara raised her own hand, the one not keeping her scarf in place, and stopped him with a gesture. "Maybe not right now," she said quietly. "I'm still getting used to being around people again. But thank you for asking instead of just staring." "Daddy says staring is rude," Lily announced. "He says if you're curious about someone, you should talk to them like they're a person, not like they're a thing to look at." "Your daddy sounds very smart," Mara said, glancing at Ethan. He was watching his daughter with an expression of pure love complicated by exhaustion. The look of someone who was trying very hard to raise a good human being while running on empty himself. "He works really hard," Lily said matter-of-factly. "He has 3 jobs because he says we have to make our own way. I don't really understand that part, but it means he's tired a lot." "Lily," Ethan said quietly, "our new friend doesn't need our whole family history in the first 5 minutes. Why not? Lily asked with perfect 6-year-old logic. How else will she know if she wants to be our friend? Ethan sighed, but he was smiling, a tired, genuine expression that transformed his worn features into something approaching handsome. I apologize. She doesn't have a filter. I like that about her, Mara said. And she realized with a jolt that she meant it. Lily's directness was refreshing after years of people either avoiding her completely or speaking in carefully modulated tones designed to signal pity without actually engaging. A server approached their table, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile that faltered when she saw Mara. The flicker of reaction was subtle but unmistakable. The slight widening of eyes, the almost imperceptible recoil. Mara had learned to read these micro-expressions the way sailors read weather patterns, each one a predictor of the storm to come. Can I get you something? The server asked, her attention fixed carefully on Ethan as if Mara might be contagious. Before Mara could speak, before she could retreat into the familiar pattern of making herself small and unobtrusive, Ethan leaned forward. My friend here, he said, emphasis deliberate on the word friend, would like to order. Mara? The server's gaze flickered to Mara's face, then away, then back with visible effort. What can I get you? Coffee, Mara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Black, and one of those pastries in the case, the one with the berries. Sure, the server said, scribbling quickly. Anything else? That's all, Mara said. Thank you. When the server left, Lily was studying Mara with renewed interest. You're very polite, she observed. Daddy says politeness costs nothing but means everything. Do you think that's true? I do, Mara said. She was acutely aware of Ethan across the table, the weight of his quiet presence. He wasn't staring, wasn't making a show of his acceptance. He was just there, solid and steady in a way that suggested reliability worn down by circumstance but not broken by it. Daddy, Lily said suddenly, is Mara going to be our friend now? That's up to Mara, Ethan said carefully. Friendship is something people choose together. We can't make that decision for her. Lily turned to Mara with all the seriousness of a contract negotiation. Do you want to be our friend? The question was so simple, it was devastating. Mara's throat tightened. When had anyone last asked for her companionship without condition? When had anyone last suggested that knowing her might be a choice made from desire, rather than obligation or pity? I'd like that, she said quietly, if you'll have me. We'll have you, Lily announced with the confidence of someone brokering a major deal. Right, Daddy? Right, Ethan said, and when his eyes met Mara's, there was understanding there. A recognition that they were both people carrying weight the world couldn't see, both trying to navigate survival while maintaining something approaching hope. The server returned with Mara's coffee and pastry, setting them down with quick efficiency before retreating. Mara wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold, something to ground her in this moment that felt increasingly surreal. So, Ethan said, settling back in his chair with the ease of someone comfortable with silence but willing to fill it. What brought you out today? Besides Lily's magnetic personality. Mara laughed, an actual laugh that surprised her with its sound. Cabin fever, she admitted. I don't get out much. Same, Ethan said. Between work and parenting and work, I don't have much of a social life. This, he gestured at the cafe, is about as exciting as it gets for me these days. What do you do? Mara asked, then immediately regretted the question. Asking about someone's occupation was normal social currency, but it also led to follow-up questions, to reciprocal sharing, to explanations she wasn't ready to give. A little bit of everything, Ethan said with a wry smile. Warehouse work during the day, delivery driving at night, and I pick up handyman jobs on weekends when I can. Glamorous stuff. There was no shame in his voice, but there was exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of someone working multiple jobs to keep their head above water. Mara recognized it because she'd seen it in her father's employees before her accident, back when she used to visit his company headquarters and actually pay attention to the people who made his empire function. That's 3 jobs, she said quietly. That's not sustainable. You sound like my friend Marcus, Ethan said. He keeps telling me I'm going to burn out, But sustainable is a luxury. Right now I'm focused on sufficient. Daddy provides, Lily said proudly. That's what he says. He provides. The simple declaration carried weight that made Mara's chest ache. She knew people like Ethan existed, people who worked themselves to exhaustion out of love rather than ambition. But she'd never sat across from one, never seen the evidence of sacrifice written in the lines around their eyes. What about you? Ethan asked. What do you do when you're not experiencing cabin fever? The question was casual, conversational, but it opened a door to territory Mara wasn't ready to navigate. What did she do? She existed. She managed her scars through an elaborate routine of treatments her father's money could buy. She avoided mirrors and people, and the life she used to have before fire had rewritten her story. I'm between things right now, she said carefully. It wasn't a lie, exactly. She'd been between things for 3 years, between the person she'd been and whoever she was becoming in this strange new existence. Ethan nodded as if this made perfect sense. I get that. Life has seasons. Sometimes you're in the building phase, sometimes you're just trying to survive the winter. The metaphor was apt enough that Mara wondered if he somehow understood more than she'd said. But his expression remained open, curious without being intrusive, engaged without demanding more than she wanted to give. Is this your usual spot? She asked, deflecting the attention back to safer ground. Lily's favorite, Ethan said, ruffling his daughter's hair with obvious affection. They have good hot chocolate and they let us sit here for a while without making us feel like we're taking up space. Most places they want you to buy, consume, and leave. Make room for the next customer. But here, they let us just be for a bit. The simple pleasure in his voice, the gratitude for a cafe that allowed them basic dignity, spoke volumes about the life he was living. Mara thought about her penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and empty rooms, about the way loneliness could exist even in luxury, maybe especially in luxury where comfort became another form of isolation. I can see why you like it, she said. They fell into conversation then, tentative at first, then gradually easier as minutes accumulated into something approaching comfort. Lily provided a kind of social buffer, her presence requiring a lightness of tone that kept the discussion from becoming too heavy or too probing. She talked about school and butterflies and a book she was reading about a girl who could talk to animals. Ethan listened to his daughter with the full attention of someone who understood that childhood was fleeting and that these moments of wonder were precious and temporary. When he spoke, it was with the careful consideration of someone who'd learned to weigh his words, to mean what he said. Mara found herself relaxing in increments, each minute expanding the space where she could simply exist without the constant vigilance fear demanded. The scarf stayed in place, the hat pulled low, but somehow these felt less like armor and more like boundaries she was allowed to maintain. An hour passed, then another. The afternoon light shifted through the cafe windows, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Other customers came and went, their lives touching briefly against this small corner of space before moving on. And in that corner, 3 people who hadn't known each other that morning were building something fragile and unlikely. Connection across the distances, trauma, and circumstance had carved. We should probably get going, Ethan said eventually, glancing at his watch with visible reluctance. I've got a shift starting in an hour, and I need to drop Lily at my friend's place first. Lily's face fell into a pout of epic proportions. But I don't want to go. I want to stay with Mara. Miss Mara, Ethan corrected gently, and I'm sure she has things to do too. Mara almost laughed at the assumption. Things to do, as if her calendar was full of obligations rather than empty spaces she filled with avoidance and routine. But she understood what Ethan was doing, giving her an exit, assuming she'd want to escape back to whatever life she'd come from. Actually, she heard herself say, I don't have anywhere to be. The words hung in the air like an invitation neither of them had expected. Ethan studied her face, the visible parts, the eyes she'd always thought were unremarkable until a stranger had called them kind, and something shifted in his expression. Lily's staying with Marcus and his wife tonight, he said slowly. He lives about 20 minutes from here. If you wanted... He paused, seeming to reconsider, then pushed forward. If you wanted to walk with us part way, you'd be welcome. No pressure, but the offer's there. It was such a small thing, a walk, 20 minutes of shared space before inevitable parting. But to Mara, it felt enormous, a bridge extending over the chasm between isolation and connection, asking her to cross without promise of what waited on the other side. She should say no. Every rule of self-preservation she'd learned screamed at her to retreat, to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment when these kind strangers realized she was a project too complicated to maintain. People like her didn't get happy endings. They got pity and carefully managed distance. "I'd like that," she said. Lily let out a cheer that turned heads throughout the cafe, but Mara barely noticed. She was watching Ethan, seeing the surprise in his eyes give way to something that looked almost like hope, as if her acceptance meant something to him too, as if maybe he was as starved for connection as she was. They gathered their things, Ethan helping Lily into her coat, Mara adjusting her scarf and hat with practiced efficiency. As they moved toward the door, Mara felt the familiar dread creeping back. Outside was exposure, was daylight without the diffused protection of interior space. Outside was where people stared openly, where children pointed and parents shushed them while stealing glances themselves. But then Ethan was beside her, not touching but present, a solid wall of quiet support. And Lily was taking her hand with the unself-conscious trust of childhood, her small fingers warm and certain around Mara's scarred skin. "Ready?" Ethan asked. Mara nodded, though she wasn't ready, would never be ready, but she stepped through the door anyway. The late afternoon air was crisp with approaching evening, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and distant rain. The street was busy, people heading home from work, students clustering outside shops, the constant flow of urban life. Mara braced herself for the reactions, for the double takes and averted eyes. But Lily was chattering happily, swinging their joined hands, oblivious to the stares her enthusiasm generated. And Ethan was walking on Mara's other side, his presence somehow making her feel less like a spectacle and more like a person moving through the world with purpose. "Daddy," Lily said, "can we show Mara the park, the one with the big fountain?" "That's in the opposite direction of Marcus's place," Ethan pointed out. "But it's so pretty, and Mara hasn't seen it." Ethan looked at Mara with a question in his eyes. "Is this okay? Are we pushing too hard?" "I'd like to see it," Mara said, surprising herself with the truth of it. When had she last been to a park? When had she last done something simply because it might be pleasant? So they changed direction, Lily leading the way with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. They walked through streets that grew quieter, more residential. Trees lined the sidewalks here, their leaves turning shades of gold and crimson. The park, when they reached it, was small but well-maintained. The fountain Lily had mentioned stood in the center, a modest structure of stone and water, nothing grand but graceful in its simplicity. A few people were scattered around, a woman reading on a bench, a man walking his dog, teenagers clustered near the playground. Lily immediately ran toward the fountain, her earlier fatigue forgotten in the presence of flowing water. Ethan called after her to be careful, then settled onto a bench with the heavily exhaled breath of someone who'd been on their feet too long. "You can sit," he said to Mara, gesturing to the space beside him. "If you want?" Mara hesitated, then sat. They were close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, far enough that there was no accidental contact. The bench faced the fountain where Lily was now attempting to catch water in her hands, giggling when it slipped through her fingers. "She's lovely," Mara said. "You've done an amazing job with her." "I'm doing my best," Ethan said, and there was a weight of complicated history in those simple words. "It's not always enough, but it's what I've got to give." "It seems like plenty," Mara said. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Lily's antics. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice quiet but clear. "Can I ask you something? You can tell me to mind my own business." Mara tensed, waiting for the inevitable questions about her scars, her story, the tragedy that had rewritten her face and her life. "Do you have people?" Ethan asked instead. "Family, friends, people who know you're struggling and are trying to help." The question caught her off guard. "I have a father," she said carefully. "He cares, in his way." "But no one who really sees you," Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Mara turned to look at him fully for the first time since they'd left the cafe. His profile was strong, defined by hard work and harder choices. There was kindness in the set of his jaw, strength in the exhaustion around his eyes. "How did you know?" she asked. "Because I recognized the look," Ethan said simply. "I wear it too. Different reasons, same result. Isolation has a particular kind of weight. You can feel it in a room, how alone someone is, even when they're surrounded by people. And in a cafe," Mara said softly. "You could feel it in a cafe." "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "I could feel it. That's why I stood up. Not because I'm some kind of hero or saint, just because I know what that weight feels like, and sometimes all you need is one person to acknowledge it exists." Mara's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing up, for seeing me. Thank you for letting me," Ethan said, "for not running. I wasn't sure you would stay." "I almost didn't." "But you did." They sat with that truth between them, the simple fact of her staying, of this moment existing when it might not have. Lily's laughter carried across the park, pure and uncomplicated. A breeze stirred the fountain's water, sending droplets catching the lowering sun like scattered diamonds. "I should tell you something," Mara said, the words coming before she could stop them. "Before this goes any further, my father, he's not just anyone, he's Benjamin Ellison." She watched for Ethan's reaction, waiting for recognition to dawn. Benjamin Ellison owned half the commercial real estate in the city, had his fingers in industries ranging from tech to manufacturing. His name appeared in business sections and society pages. He was the kind of man whose influence shaped economies, but Ethan just looked confused. "Should I know who that is?" Mara almost laughed. "He's very wealthy, very powerful. I'm telling you because if we're going to be friends, you should know that my life is complicated, that there are implications to knowing me beyond just my face." "Okay," Ethan said, processing this. "So your dad's rich. That why you've been hiding? People trying to get at him through you?" "Partly," Mara admitted, "but mostly I've been hiding because I'm ashamed, because I let myself believe that these scars make me less than human, that I don't deserve to be seen or known. Your father's protection just made it easier to stay hidden." "For what it's worth," Ethan said quietly, "I think that's bullshit. Respectfully." Mara blinked. "What?" "The idea that scars make you less human, that's bullshit." Ethan gestured to Lily. "You know what she saw when she looked at you? A person. Not a face, not a tragedy, just a person who might want to be her friend. Kids are good at that. They haven't learned to overcomplicate things yet." "Adults are different," Mara said. "Adults are trained to be different," Ethan corrected. "We're taught what to value, what to fear, what to avoid. But none of that is truth with a capital T. It's just conditioning. And conditioning can be unlearned." "You sound very sure about that." "I'm not sure about much," Ethan admitted, "but I'm sure that in the 2 hours I've known you, I've seen more humanity in your eyes than I see in most people I encounter all day. And I'm sure that if you let shame win, if you disappear back into hiding, the world will be poorer for it." The conviction in his voice made something crack wider in Mara's chest, that fissure that had opened at Lily's simple kindness now spreading, letting light into spaces that had been dark for years. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed. "How to be in the world again, how to let people see me." "One day at a time," Ethan said. "One person at a time. You did it today. You can do it again tomorrow." "What if tomorrow I can't? What if I fail?" "Then you fail," Ethan said with a shrug. "Failure isn't final unless you let it be. You try again the next day, and the day after that. Eventually, the good days start to outnumber the bad ones." "You sound like you've had practice with this philosophy." "I've had practice with surviving," Ethan said. "When Lily's mother left, when I lost my job, when I realized I was going to be raising a daughter alone without a safety net, yeah, I learned that sometimes all you can do is survive today and try again tomorrow." There was story there, depth Mara wanted to explore, but before she could ask, Lily came running back, soaking wet and delighted. "Daddy, I tried to catch the water, but it wouldn't stay in my hands." "That's generally how water works," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "We need to get you dried off before we head to Marcus's. He's going to think I let you go swimming in your clothes." Can Mara come? Lily asked hopefully. To Marcus's house? Sweetheart, I'm sure Mara has her own plans. Actually, Mara interrupted, I don't. If the offer's genuine, I'd like to come, if that's okay. Ethan studied her for a long moment. It's more than okay. But I should warn you, Marcus is going to ask 1,000 questions, and his wife Elena will try to feed you whether you're hungry or not. They're good people, but they're a lot. I think I can handle a lot, Mara said, and she meant it. After years of nothing, of silence and isolation, a lot sounded perfect. They walked through the evening together, an unlikely trio that drew stares and whispers but kept moving forward anyway. Lily chattered between them, bridging any awkward silences with the ease of childhood. Ethan pointed out landmarks, told stories about the neighborhood, and Mara listened, absorbed, feeling like someone waking from a long sleep to discover the world had continued spinning without her but might have space for her still. Marcus's house turned out to be a small, well-kept home in a working-class neighborhood. The moment they knocked, the door flew open to reveal a man about Ethan's age with an infectious grin. About time, Lily. Elena made cookies, and she's been waiting. Marcus stopped mid-sentence when he saw Mara. His eyes widened, but to his credit, his smile didn't falter. And you brought a friend. Ethan, you didn't mention you'd be bringing company. It's a recent development, Ethan said, his hand briefly touching the small of Mara's back, a gentle, protective gesture. Marcus, this is Mara. Marcus is my oldest friend, and the reason I haven't completely lost my mind. Debatable, Marcus said, extending his hand. Any friend of Ethan's is welcome here. Come in, come in. They stepped into warmth and the scent of baking. A woman appeared from the kitchen, small, warm-eyed, radiating the kind of comfortable competence that came from genuine kindness. Elena, she introduced herself, looking at Mara with curiosity but without the cruel edge Mara had learned to expect. Please, sit, you must be hungry. And just like that, Mara found herself pulled into the orbit of other people's lives, accepted not because she'd earned it or proven herself worthy, but simply because she'd walked through a door with someone they cared about. The evening unfolded in a blur of conversation, laughter, and the simple domesticity of people sharing space. Lily showed Mara her favorite toys. Elena indeed tried to feed everyone. Marcus told terrible jokes that made Ethan groan. Through it all, Mara felt herself slowly unfurling, like something that had been tightly clenched for years finally learning to relax. She was still wearing her scarf, still hiding, but hiding felt less like necessity and more like choice, a boundary she could lower when ready rather than a prison she couldn't escape. When it came time to leave, Ethan checking his watch with visible reluctance, duty calling him to his night shift, Mara found herself genuinely disappointed to go. Thank you, she told Elena and Marcus, for welcoming me into your home. Come back any time, Elena said, and the invitation felt genuine. Anyone who makes Ethan smile like that is welcome here. Outside, night had fully fallen. The street was quiet, lit by pools of lamplight. Ethan walked Mara to her car, a sleek vehicle that looked completely out of place in this modest neighborhood. This was unexpected, he said as they reached the driver's side door. Good, but unexpected. The best things usually are, Mara said. She hesitated, then made a decision. Can I give you my number, in case you wanted to talk again? I'd like that, Ethan said simply. He pulled out his phone, and they exchanged information with the slightly awkward formality of people navigating new connection. I work a lot, he warned. My schedule is insane, but if you text, I'll respond when I can. That's all I'm asking for, Mara said. Just connection, when possible. They stood there in the lamplight, two people who'd been strangers that afternoon, now tethered by the fragile threads of possibility. Mara knew she should get in her car, drive back to her empty penthouse, return to the safety of solitude. But she didn't want to. For the first time in 3 years, she wanted to stay in the world, wanted to see what might happen next. Ethan, she said quietly, thank you for standing up in that cafe, for not looking away. Thank you for staying, he replied, for giving today a chance. She got into her car finally, started the engine. Through the window, she could see Ethan standing there, hands in his pockets, watching to make sure she got away safely. Such a simple gesture, Such profound care. Mara drove through the night, her mind replaying every moment of the day. The cafe, the park, the warmth of Marcus and Elena's home, Lily's unselfconscious affection, Ethan's steady presence, his refusal to be frightened or repelled. When she reached her penthouse, the silence that usually suffocated felt different, less like an ending and more like a pause between chapters. She removed her scarf and hat, caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, something she usually avoided. The scars were still there, of course, the melted landscape of tissue that had replaced the face she used to know. But looking at them now, after a day of being seen and accepted, they felt less like a curse and more like history, something that had happened to her rather than something that defined her completely. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Made it home okay?" Ethan Mara smiled, actually smiled at her scarred reflection, and typed back, "Yes. Thank you for today, for everything." The response came quickly. "Thank you for taking a chance on us. Lily hasn't stopped talking about you. Pretty sure you're her new favorite person. Tell her the feeling is mutual. Will do. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another day." Mara set her phone down and looked around her expensive, empty apartment. Tomorrow was another day. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like a promise rather than a threat. She'd walked through a cafe door that afternoon expecting rejection. She'd found something else instead. People who looked at her and saw human rather than horrible, who offered connection without condition, who suggested that maybe healing looked less like hiding and more like stepping into light. It was one day, one afternoon, a handful of hours that could easily be dismissed as anomaly rather than turning point. But Mara knew better. Something had shifted. Some fundamental equation in her relationship with the world had changed its variables. She'd been seen, she'd been accepted. And more importantly, she'd accepted herself enough to allow it. As she prepared for bed, going through routines that had become automatic over years of isolation, Mara felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to identify the sensation. Hope. Fragile, tentative, barely more than a whisper against the roar of fear and shame that had defined her existence since the fire. But there, undeniably there, she'd taken Ethan's hand, metaphorically, in that cafe when he'd offered connection instead of judgment. And the world hadn't ended. She hadn't shattered. Instead, she'd discovered that maybe, just maybe, there was a version of life after trauma that didn't require complete disappearance. Tomorrow, she might wake up and lose her courage. Tomorrow, she might retreat back into hiding. Tomorrow held no guarantees, but today she'd been brave enough to stay. And that was enough to build on. In another part of the city, Ethan was starting his delivery shift, driving through streets he knew by heart, thinking about a woman with kind eyes who'd walked into his afternoon and somehow made the weight of 3 jobs and single parenthood feel a little lighter. In Marcus and Elena's house, Lily was sleeping, dreaming about butterflies and new friends, and a world where kindness was the most natural response to encountering another person. And in her penthouse, Mara lay awake, her fingers tracing the scars she usually refused to acknowledge, thinking about parks and fountains and the possibility that shame didn't have to be the final word on her story. They were 3 people, 5, counting Marcus and Elena, whose lives had intersected by chance and choice. The story of what would happen next was still unwritten, still open to infinite possibility. But tonight, in this moment, possibility was enough. The text started small. Simple check-ins that felt like lifelines thrown across the distance between Mara's penthouse and Ethan's cramped apartment across town. "How was your day?" "Lily drew you a picture. She wants to know if you like butterflies. Found a cafe that actually has decent coffee. Reminded me of our first conversation." Mara responded to each one with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief that someone actually wanted to maintain contact. Her father's assistant had called twice that week, checking if she needed anything, speaking in the carefully neutral tone reserved for managing difficult situations. But Ethan's messages were different. They carried warmth, genuine interest, the assumption that her responses mattered. 3 days after their first meeting, Mara received a photo. Lily holding up a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, one with long hair and what appeared to be a colorful scarf. Beneath it, in Ethan's handwriting, "Us." Mara stared at that image for 20 minutes, her throat tight with emotions she couldn't name. When had anyone last included her in their concept of us? When had she last been part of something beyond her own isolated existence? She saved the photo and texted back, "It's beautiful. Tell her I love it." The response came quickly. She says you have to come see her new library book. It has butterflies and fairies. Apparently this is very important. When? Whenever you want. We're usually home on Sundays. Marcus and Elena come over for lunch. You'd be welcome. Mara's first instinct was to decline, to manufacture an excuse that would preserve the comfortable distance of text-based connection. But then she remembered Lily's hand in hers, Ethan's quiet acceptance. The way being seen had felt less like exposure and more like relief. I'll be there. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made the city feel renewed, scrubbed clean by overnight rain. Mara changed outfits 4 times before settling on jeans and a soft sweater. Casual enough not to signal effort, nice enough not to look like she'd given up on presentation entirely. The scarf stayed, as did a lighter version of the hat. She wasn't ready to abandon all armor. Ethan's apartment was in a building that had seen better decades. The elevator was broken, the hallway carpet worn thin by years of foot traffic. But when Mara knocked on Unit 4C, the door that opened revealed warmth that had nothing to do with physical surroundings. "You came!" Lily shrieked, launching herself at Mara with the confidence of someone who'd never learned that not everyone welcomed enthusiastic physical contact. Mara caught her automatically, surprised by the weight of a 6-year-old, more surprised by her own instinct to hold rather than deflect. "Of course I came. I heard there were butterflies and fairies. That's not something you miss." "Lily, let Mara breathe," Ethan called from somewhere inside. He appeared a moment later, wearing an apron dusted with flour, looking exhausted and happy in equal measure. "Sorry, she's been watching the door since 9 this morning." "It's only 11, Mara pointed out. "I'm aware," Ethan said with a wry smile. "Please, come in. Ignore the mess. Or don't ignore it. It's pretty unavoidable, actually." Mara stepped into an apartment that was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it. Small, yes. Worn furniture, scuffed floors, walls that needed paint. But also, Lily's artwork covering the refrigerator, books stacked on every available surface, a blanket fort constructed in the corner of the living room with what appeared to be advanced engineering. "Sorry about the chaos," Ethan said, closing the door behind her. "Sunday is fort day. It's tradition." "It's wonderful," Mara said, and meant it. The space felt lived in, loved in, the opposite of her pristine penthouse where nothing was out of place because nothing was really used. "Marcus and Elena should be here soon," Ethan continued, leading her toward a kitchen that was barely large enough for one person, let alone the cooking operation currently in progress. "I'm making lasagna." "Well, attempting to make lasagna. There's a non-zero chance we end up ordering pizza." "Can I help?" Mara asked. Ethan paused, studying her with that careful attention she was learning to recognize. "You cook?" "I used to," Mara admitted. "Before, I was pretty good at it, actually." "Then yes, please help. I'm operating on YouTube tutorials and hope, which is not a reliable culinary strategy." They fell into an easy rhythm, Mara taking over the bechamel sauce that Ethan had been making unnecessarily complicated, Ethan handling the layering with the focused concentration of someone who took instructions very seriously. Lily provided commentary from her position on the counter, where she was supposedly helping but mostly eating shredded cheese. "Daddy says cooking is love made edible," Lily announced. "Is that true, Mara?" "I think it can be," Mara said, adjusting the heat under her saucepan. "When you cook for people you care about, you're giving them your time and attention. That's a kind of love." "Do you love us?" Lily asked with the blunt directness that made adults uncomfortable but children found perfectly natural. "Lily," Ethan said quietly, "that's not... People need time before..." "I'm getting there," Mara interrupted, surprising herself. "I like you very much. Love takes time to grow, but like is an excellent start." Lily considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "That's fair," she decided. "I like you very much too. Daddy likes you. He smiles more when he talks about you." "Lily!" Ethan's face flushed. "We talked about the filter thing." "But it's true," Lily protested. "You do smile more." Mara glanced at Ethan, saw the embarrassment there, but also something else, confirmation that Lily's observation was accurate. The knowledge sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Well," she said lightly, "your daddy makes me smile more too, so it's mutual." The doorbell rang before the moment could become more awkward. Marcus and Elena arrived in a whirlwind of energy, bringing wine and homemade bread and the kind of chaotic affection that made small spaces feel abundant. "Mara!" Elena greeted her with a hug that Mara hadn't been prepared for but found herself returning. "I'm so glad you came. Marcus has been driving me crazy speculating about Ethan's mysterious new friend." "I have not been speculating," Marcus protested. "I've been observing and forming evidence-based theories." "He made a list," Elena stage whispered to Mara. "An actual list of theories. I married a man who makes lists about his best friend's social life." "In my defense," Marcus said, "Ethan hasn't brought anyone around in years. This is significant data." "I'm standing right here," Ethan pointed out. "And can we not treat Mara like she's a specimen for analysis?" "Too late," Marcus said cheerfully. "We're already analyzing. It's what we do. You know this about us." The afternoon unfolded with the comfortable chaos of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. They ate lasagna that turned out better than Ethan had feared, drank wine, Mara nursing a single glass because she wasn't used to alcohol anymore, and talked about everything and nothing. Mara learned that Marcus worked in IT, that Elena taught third grade, that they'd been trying to have a baby for 2 years without success. She learned that Ethan had been an engineer before layoffs had devastated his company, that he'd been working multiple jobs for 3 years since Lily's mother left, that his dream was to eventually get back into his field, but right now survival took precedence over ambition. And slowly, carefully, she shared pieces of her own story. Not the whole thing, not the fire, not the full extent of her isolation, but enough. That she'd been in an accident, that recovery had been long and complicated, that she was trying to figure out how to live again. No one pushed for more. No one treated her revelations like insufficient data. They simply accepted what she offered and moved on, as if partial information was perfectly adequate for connection. "Mara," Lily said during a lull in adult conversation, "can I ask about your face now?" The room went silent. Elena looked mortified. Marcus froze mid-sip. Ethan opened his mouth, probably to redirect, but Mara raised her hand. "What do you want to know?" she asked. Lily climbed off her father's lap and approached Mara with the seriousness of someone on an important mission. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore," Mara said. "Not physically." "What happened?" "There was a fire," Mara said simply. "I was hurt. The doctors fixed what they could, but some things can't be fixed completely." Lily processed this with visible concentration. "Can I see?" Every adult in the room tensed. This was the moment, the edge of exposure that Mara had been avoiding for 3 years. She could deflect, could maintain her boundaries, could keep the scarf in place and no one would blame her, but Lily was looking at her with simple curiosity devoid of cruelty. And Ethan was watching with concern, but not judgment, ready to support whatever choice she made. And something in Mara, some part that was tired of hiding, tired of shame, made a decision. "Okay," she said quietly. "But just you. Is that all right?" Lily nodded solemnly. Mara glanced at Ethan, who was already standing. "We'll give you privacy," he said. "Kitchen?" The adults retreated, leaving Mara and Lily alone in the living room. Mara's hand shook as she reached for her scarf. She'd removed it in private countless times, faced her reflection with varying degrees of acceptance and horror. But letting someone else see, choosing exposure, felt enormous. "Are you scared?" Lily asked. "Yes," Mara admitted. "I'm scared you'll think I'm ugly, that you won't want to be my friend anymore." "That's silly," Lily said with perfect confidence. "Friendship isn't about faces. It's about hearts. Daddy taught me that." The simple wisdom of it nearly broke Mara. She unwound the scarf slowly, revealing the landscape of melted tissue that covered the left side of her face and neck. Scar tissue pulled her mouth into a permanent slight twist. Her left ear was partially gone. The skin was shiny, discolored, a map of trauma written in flesh. Lily studied her with the kind of intense focus children brought to new discoveries. Mara waited for the recoil, the fear, the disgust she'd seen in mirrors and imagined in the eyes of strangers. "Does it feel different?" Lily asked. "When you touch it?" "Yes," Mara said. "The scarred parts don't have as much feeling. It's sort of numb." "Can I touch it? Just a little?" Mara's breath caught. "Okay." Lily reached out with one small finger and gently traced a line of scar tissue down Mara's cheek. Her touch was feather-light, curious, but not repelled. "It's like a map," she said thoughtfully, "like rivers and mountains on skin." The observation was so unexpected, so free of judgment, that Mara felt tears welling up. "I never thought of it that way." "Daddy says scars are just proof that you survived something hard," Lily said. "He has a scar on his hand from when he was fixing something and it cut him. He says it reminds him to be more careful, but also that he can heal from getting hurt." "Your daddy is very wise," Mara managed. "I know," Lily said seriously. "He's the best daddy ever. Are you going to be my friend even though you have scars?" The question, the beautiful reversal of it, made Mara laugh through tears. "Yes, if you'll still be mine." "Obviously," Lily said, as if this was the most natural conclusion in the world. "Can I hug you?" Mara nodded, and Lily wrapped her arms around her with the wholehearted affection children gave when they decided someone was worth loving. Mara held her, this small person who'd looked at her worst and found maps instead of monsters, and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of what was possible. When they emerged from the living room, Mara's scarf back in place, but something changed in her posture, her bearing. The adults were pretending to be busy in the kitchen. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked carefully. "Everything's perfect," Lily announced. "Mara's scars are like maps and she's still my friend, and can we have ice cream now?" Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Marcus was gripping his wine glass like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. Ethan was looking at his daughter with such profound love and pride that Mara had to look away from the intensity of it. "Ice cream sounds perfect," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. They moved back into the living room, the afternoon settling into a different rhythm. Softer, more intimate, as if Lily's acceptance had cracked something open that let them all breathe easier. Mara found herself actually relaxing, her usual hypervigilance fading in the presence of people who'd proven themselves safe. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said to Mara during a quiet moment while Lily was showing Elena her butterfly book. "And you can absolutely tell me it's none of my business." "Okay," Mara said cautiously. "That first day into the cafe, what made you stay?" "When Ethan approached you." Mara glanced at Ethan, who was watching her with quiet attention. "Honestly, I was so surprised by kindness that I couldn't process what was happening fast enough to run. By the time I realized he wasn't going to be cruel, I was already invested in seeing where it went." "I almost didn't do it," Ethan admitted. "I stood up 3 times before I actually walked over. Kept thinking about all the ways it could go wrong, how I might make things worse." "What changed?" Mara asked. "I imagine Lily asking me later why I didn't help someone who was clearly struggling," Ethan said simply. "I want to raise her to be brave and kind. Hard to teach that if I'm not willing to practice it myself." "Well, I'm grateful for your parenting philosophy," Mara said. "It changed my life." The words hung in the air, bigger than she'd intended. But they were true. One decision, Ethan choosing to stand up, Mara choosing to stay, had altered the trajectory of her entire existence. She was here, in this worn apartment, with these generous people, instead of alone in her penthouse contemplating another day of isolation. "Changed mine too," Ethan said quietly. For the record, their eyes met across the small space, and something passed between them. Recognition, possibility, the acknowledgement that whatever was building here mattered to both of them. "Okay, this is getting too serious," Marcus declared. "Who wants to play Cards Against Humanity, the family-friendly version, since we have a 6-year-old? "That's not a real thing," Elena protested. "It is now. I made it, with crayons and aggressive optimism." The evening dissolved into laughter and terrible card combinations, and Lily's delight at being included in adult games, even if she didn't understand half the references. Mara couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed this much, this freely. Every time she caught herself being genuinely happy, there was a moment of guilt, as if joy was something she no longer deserved. But then someone would say something ridiculous, and she'd be swept back into the moment. As the sun set and shadows lengthened across the apartment, Marcus and Elena began gathering their things. "We should get going," Elena said reluctantly. "Early morning tomorrow, third graders wait for no one." "Thanks for coming," Ethan said, hugging them both. "And for the bread, and the wine, and the company." "Thanks for the lasagna that didn't poison us," Marcus replied. "Growth, buddy. We're seeing real growth in your culinary journey." After they left, the apartment felt larger and quieter. Lily was drooping, worn out from a day of excitement. Ethan scooped her up with practiced ease. "Bedtime, little butterfly," he said. "But Mara's still here," Lily protested sleepily. "Mara will still be here when you wake up," Ethan said, then glanced at Mara with a question in his eyes. "I can stay for a bit," Mara confirmed, "if that's okay." "More than okay." Ethan carried Lily to her room, a small space Mara glimpsed briefly, full of books and stuffed animals and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She heard the murmur of bedtime routine, Ethan's voice reading a story, Lily's sleepy questions gradually fading into silence. Mara stood in the living room, surrounded by evidence of their life. Photos on the walls. Lily at various ages, always with Ethan, never with a mother in frame. A calendar covered in color-coded schedules. Bills stacked on the counter, some marked with red stamps that probably meant overdue. This was real life. Not the sanitized version money could buy, but the messy, complicated reality of someone doing their best with limited resources and unlimited love. Ethan emerged from Lily's room, leaving the door cracked. "She's out. Today was a big day." "She's incredible," Mara said. "You've done an amazing job with her." "I'm trying," Ethan said, moving to the kitchen to start cleaning up. "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. Other days, like today, I think maybe we're going to be okay." "Can I help?" Mara asked, gesturing at the dishes. "You don't have to." "I want to." They washed dishes side by side, falling into the kind of comfortable silence that suggested familiarity beyond their brief acquaintance. Ethan washed, Mara dried, and the simple domesticity of it felt profound in ways Mara couldn't articulate. "Thank you for today," Ethan said after a while. "For coming. For being patient with Lily's questions. For trusting us." "Thank you for inviting me," Mara replied, "for making space for me in your life." "Mara." Ethan turned off the water, drying his hands on a towel before facing her fully. "I need to say something, and I need you to know I don't have any expectations attached to it." Mara's heart rate picked up. "Okay? I like you," he said simply. "Not because I feel sorry for you, not because I'm some kind of charity case looking for purpose. I like you because you're smart and kind and you make me laugh. Because you showed Lily that strength looks different than she expected. Because in the few times we've talked, I've felt more connected than I have in years." Mara's throat tightened. "Ethan, let me finish," he said gently. "I also know that my life is complicated. I'm broke, I work all the time, I have a kid who has to come first. I can't offer you anything remotely resembling the lifestyle you're probably used to. And I know there are probably 1,000 reasons why anything between us would be complicated, but I needed you to know that whatever this is, it matters to me." The honesty of it, the vulnerable courage it took to say those words, made Mara's eyes burn with tears. "It matters to me too," she whispered. "More than I know how to explain. I've been hiding for so long that I forgot what it felt like to want to be seen. You make me want to be seen." "Then let me see you," Ethan said. He stepped closer, close enough that Mara could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Not just the parts you think are acceptable. All of it." "I'm scared," Mara admitted, "of disappointing you, of not being enough." "Mara." Ethan's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, before gently touching her face, the scarred side hidden beneath her scarf. "You are already more than enough, exactly as you are." The touch, deliberate, tender, focused on the parts of her she'd learned to hide, broke something open in Mara's chest. She leaned into his palm, feeling the warmth of human contact against skin that had known only clinical examination for years. "Can I kiss you?" Ethan asked quietly. Mara's breath caught. "My mouth. The scars pull it. I don't care about that. Ethan said. I care about you, about this moment, about choosing to be brave together. Mara nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Ethan leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. His lips met hers with a gentleness that acknowledged her fear and her scars and her worth all at once. It wasn't a perfect kiss. The scar tissue made her mouth less mobile than it once was, and Mara was desperately out of practice. But it was real and honest, and filled with a tenderness that made her believe for the first time in 3 years that maybe she deserved softness after all. When they pulled apart, Mara was crying openly. Ethan brushed away her tears with his thumbs, his expression so gentle it hurt to look at. Hey, he said softly. You okay? I forgot what it felt like, Mara whispered. To be touched like I'm precious instead of broken. You are precious, Ethan said. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. They stood in his small kitchen, holding each other as evening deepened into night. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm. Inside, 2 people were writing a different story. One where scars were maps instead of verdicts, where kindness was revolutionary, where choosing to be seen was the bravest act of all. Mara's phone buzzed in her pocket, shattering the moment. She pulled it out reluctantly, saw her father's name on the screen. I should take this, she said apologetically. Of course, Ethan said, stepping back to give her privacy. Mara answered, her voice steadier than she felt. Hello, Dad. Mara. Benjamin Ellison's voice was warm but concerned. I haven't heard from you in days. Are you all right? I'm fine, she said. Actually, I'm better than fine. I've been getting out more, making friends. There was a pause. Friends? Mara, that's wonderful. Who? Just some people I met, she said carefully, glancing at Ethan, who was pretending to be busy organizing already organized cabinets. Good people. I'd like to meet them, her father said. Maybe we could have dinner. I could send a car. Maybe, Mara said, anxiety spiking at the thought of her 2 worlds colliding. Let me think about it. Of course, I don't want to push. I'm just glad you're engaging with the world again. You sound happier. I am happier, Mara admitted, surprising herself with the truth of it. They talked for a few more minutes before ending the call. When Mara turned around, Ethan was watching her with carefully neutral expression. Your father? He asked. Yeah, he wants to meet my new friends. Mara laughed without humor. I can't even imagine how that conversation would go. Dad, this is Ethan. He works 3 jobs and lives in a 1-bedroom apartment with his daughter. But he's the first person in 3 years who's made me feel human, so please don't ruin this. You think he'd try to ruin it? Ethan asked quietly. Mara hesitated. I think he'd try to protect me, which isn't the same thing, but the outcome might be similar. Because I'm not good enough for his daughter, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Because he has very specific ideas about what my life should look like, Mara corrected. And they don't include... She stopped, realizing how terrible the rest of that sentence would sound. Don't include someone like me, Ethan finished. His voice was carefully neutral, but Mara heard the hurt underneath. That's not what I think, she said urgently. Ethan, It's okay, he interrupted. I get it. I knew going into this that our lives are different. I just didn't realize how much that might matter. It doesn't matter to me, Mara insisted, but it might matter to your father, and eventually we'd have to deal with that. Ethan ran his hand through his hair, exhaustion suddenly visible in every line of his body. Mara, I don't want to be something you have to hide, and I can't be someone who causes problems between you and your family. So what are you saying? Mara asked, fear creeping up her spine. I'm saying we should be realistic about what this is, what it can be. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. I care about you, but I have Lily to think about. I can't let her get attached to someone who might disappear when reality gets complicated. I'm not going to disappear, Mara protested. Can you promise that? Ethan challenged. When your father finds out you're spending time with a broke single dad, can you promise me you'll fight for this? For us? Mara opened her mouth to say yes, to promise anything, but honesty stopped her. Could she fight her father? Could she stand up to the man who'd protected her, isolated her, loved her in his complicated way? I don't know, she whispered. She. Ethan nodded, something sad settling in his expression. Then maybe we should slow down, keep this casual. Friends, nothing that requires promises we're not sure we can keep. The words felt like retreat, like doors closing just as they'd begun to open. But Mara couldn't argue because she understood the wisdom in them. She was still finding her courage. She wasn't ready to defend this fragile thing against the weight of her father's expectations. Friends, she agreed, even as her heart cracked around the compromise. I should go. It's late. Let me walk you to your car, Ethan said. They made their way downstairs in heavy silence. The night air was cold, carrying the promise of winter. Mara's expensive car looked absurd parked on this modest street, a visible reminder of the gap between their worlds. Ethan, Mara said as she reached for the door handle, I'm sorry for not being braver. Don't apologize for being realistic, Ethan said. We both need to protect ourselves. And Lily, she has to come first. I know. I respect that. I just wish... Yeah, Ethan said softly. Me too. Mara drove home through empty streets, tears blurring her vision. She'd found connection, found hope, found the possibility of something beautiful, and immediately complicated it with all the baggage she'd been carrying. Her father, her money. The distance between who she was and who Ethan needed her to be. But when she reached for her phone at a red light, she found a message waiting. Still friends, always friends. Today was perfect. Don't let my caution ruin that. Mara typed back through tears. Today was perfect. Thank you for everything. The response came quickly. Sleep well. Tomorrow's another day to be brave. Mara held on to those words like a promise, even as uncertainty clouded everything else. She'd been brave today, shown her face, accepted a kiss, allowed herself to hope. That had to count for something, even if the path forward wasn't clear. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own choices. But tonight, she'd been seen and accepted and cared for. Tonight, she'd remembered what it felt like to be human instead of hidden. It would have to be enough. The word friends became both comfort and cage over the following weeks. Mara and Ethan maintained contact, texts throughout the day, occasional phone calls when his schedule allowed, Sunday visits that became routine. But there was a carefulness now. An invisible boundary neither crossed. No more kisses in dim kitchens, no more vulnerability that suggested anything beyond platonic connection. Mara told herself it was enough. She'd gone from total isolation to having people who genuinely cared about her. She got to watch Lily grow and learn, got to be part of something resembling family. The fact that her heart ached every time Ethan smiled at her without touching, every time she left his apartment alone. Well, that was just the price of being realistic. Her father, meanwhile, had grown increasingly curious about her new social life. Benjamin Ellison was a man accustomed to knowing everything about his daughter's world, and Mara's vague answers about friends clearly frustrated him. Bring them to dinner, he'd said during one of their weekly phone calls. I'd like to meet the people who've made such a difference in your recovery. They're busy people, Dad. They have their own lives. Everyone has time for dinner, Mara, unless you're ashamed of them or ashamed of me. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Mara was terrified of what would happen when her worlds collided, when her father's wealth and power met Ethan's humble reality, when the man who'd built an empire faced the man who could barely keep his electricity on. I'm not ashamed, she'd said quietly. I'm protective of all of you. But Benjamin Ellison hadn't built his empire by accepting evasion. Next Friday, he'd declared, my house. Tell your friends I insist. It's just dinner, Mara. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, Mara thought. Absolutely everything. She'd put off telling Ethan for 3 days, dreading the conversation. When she finally called him, a Tuesday evening when she knew his delivery shift would be ending, her hands were shaking. Hey, Ethan answered, slightly breathless. Just finished up. What's going on? My father wants to meet you, Mara blurted. And Lily. He's invited us all to dinner Friday night. Silence stretched across the line. Mara could hear traffic in the background, the sounds of the city Ethan navigated every night to make ends meet. Mara, he said finally. I don't think that's a good idea. I know, I agree, but he's insisting, and I don't know how to say no without making things worse. Tell him the truth, that we're just friends, that there's no reason for formal introductions. He knows it's more than that, Mara said quietly, or at least he suspects. I've never talked about anyone the way I talk about you and Lily. Another pause. What do you want me to do? The question was layered with meaning. What did she want? For him to decline, protecting them both from inevitable disaster? For him to agree, proving he was willing to fight for whatever they might become? For the whole situation to simply disappear so they could keep existing in their careful, bounded friendship? I want you to do whatever feels right for you and Lily, Mara said. I'm not going to pressure you, but I also want you to know that if you say no, my father will probably show up at your apartment unannounced. He's protective that way. Jesus, Ethan muttered. Okay. Let me think about it. Can I call you back? Of course. They hung up, and Mara sat in her penthouse watching the city lights blur through tears. She'd wanted connection so desperately, had been so grateful for the scraps of normalcy Ethan and Lily offered. But she'd brought complications into their lives. The weight of her father's expectations, the scrutiny of wealth and power. Maybe she should have stayed hidden after all. Ethan called back an hour later. We'll come, he said without preamble. On 2 conditions. Name them. 1, you don't apologize for your father's behavior, whatever it is. He's his own person, just like I'm mine. You're not responsible for managing everyone's emotions. Okay, Mara agreed, though she knew following that advice would be nearly impossible. 2, if at any point Lily gets uncomfortable or this becomes too much, we leave. No explanations, no drawn-out goodbyes. We just go. Absolutely. Ethan, are you sure about this? No, he admitted. But I'm also not willing to let fear make all my decisions. We'll come. We'll be polite. We'll see what happens. Thank you, Mara whispered. Don't thank me yet. I haven't met your father. The days leading up to Friday crawled past with excruciating slowness. Mara tried to prepare Ethan for what to expect, her father's mansion in the suburbs, the staff, the formality of it all. She tried to downplay the wealth gap, to make it seem less intimidating than it was. Mara, Ethan finally said during one particularly anxious phone call, I know I'm poor. You don't have to tiptoe around it. I'm not embarrassed by my life. I'm not tiptoeing. You are. And I get why. But let's just be honest about what this is. Your father is rich. I'm not. He probably won't approve of me. I'm okay with that as long as you are. I'm not okay with anyone disapproving of you, Mara protested. But you won't fight him if he does, Ethan said quietly. Will you? The question hung between them like an accusation. Mara wanted to say yes, wanted to promise she'd stand up to her father, defend what was growing between them. But honesty stopped her because she didn't know if she had that courage yet. I'm working on it, she said finally. Being brave, standing up, all of it. I know you are, Ethan said, his voice softening. I'm not trying to pressure you. I just need to know where we stand. Where do you want to stand? Ethan stopped, sighed. I want things that probably aren't realistic. So for now, let's just get through Friday, one crisis at a time. Friday arrived too soon and not soon enough. Mara had arranged for a car to pick up Ethan and Lily, not wanting them to navigate the complicated directions to her father's estate. When the driver texted that he'd collected them, her stomach clenched with anxiety. She'd come early to help prepare, though her father's staff hardly needed assistance. Benjamin Ellison's home was a monument to success, sprawling, immaculate, filled with art that cost more than most people's houses. Mara had grown up here, had once thought this was normal. Now, seeing it through Ethan's eyes, she recognized it for what it was: excessive, intimidating, designed to remind visitors of their host's power. You're nervous, her father observed as they waited in the formal living room. Benjamin was in his early 60s, still handsome, still commanding despite the gray threading through his dark hair. He wore his wealth casually, expensive clothes that didn't announce their price, confidence that came from never doubting his place in the world. I want this to go well, Mara admitted. Why wouldn't it? I'm simply meeting your friends. Benjamin studied his daughter with the sharp attention that had built his empire. Unless there's something you're not telling me. Before Mara could answer, the doorbell chimed. Her father's butler, yes, he actually had a butler, moved to answer it. Mara's heart hammered as voices echoed from the foyer. Then Lily burst into the room like sunshine personified, her eyes wide with wonder. Mara, this house is like a castle. Do you have a dragon? No dragons, Mara said, unable to help smiling despite her anxiety. Just us mortals. Ethan followed his daughter more slowly, taking in the room with the careful attention of someone assessing a situation. He dressed up, khakis and a button-down that Mara suspected might be the nicest clothes he owned. His discomfort was visible in the set of his shoulders, the way he stayed close to Lily as if she was his anchor. Benjamin Ellison stood, and Mara watched her father's expression as he took in Ethan, the worn shoes, the off-brand clothes, the visible exhaustion of someone who worked too hard for too little. Something shifted in Benjamin's eyes, a calculation being made. Mr. Ellison, Ethan said, extending his hand. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Ethan Brooks. This is my daughter, Lily. Benjamin shook his hand with the firm grip of someone establishing dominance. Benjamin, please. Any friend of Mara's is welcome here. The words were polite, but the tone suggested evaluation rather than warmth. Hi, Lily said, apparently immune to intimidation. I'm 6 and I like butterflies, and Mara is my best friend. Well, one of them. My other best friend is Sophie from school, but she's on vacation. Despite himself, Benjamin's expression softened slightly. It's nice to meet you, Lily. Mara has told me a lot about you. She has? Lily beamed at Mara. Did you tell him about my butterfly collection? I did, Mara confirmed. And about how smart you are. Let's move to the dining room, Benjamin suggested. Dinner should be ready shortly. The dining room was even more intimidating than the living room, a table that could seat 20 crystal chandeliers, artwork that belonged in museums. Lily's eyes went wide, but Ethan's expression had gone carefully neutral, a mask that hid whatever he was feeling. They sat at one end of the massive table, the space somehow making the gathering feel more like a business meeting than a casual dinner. Staff appeared with the first course, a soup Mara knew cost more per bowl than Ethan probably spent on groceries in a week. So, Ethan, Benjamin said after the initial awkwardness of starting to eat, Mara tells me you're working several jobs. What field are you in? Currently, logistics, delivery, and general maintenance, Ethan said evenly. Whatever pays the bills. And before, I imagine you had other aspirations. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. I was an engineer, aerospace. Got laid off 3 years ago when my company downsized. Haven't been able to break back into the field. Aerospace, Benjamin repeated, interest sparking. Which company? Ethan named it, and Mara saw recognition flash across her father's face. He knew the company, probably knew about the layoffs that had devastated hundreds of families when private sector contracts dried up. That was unfortunate timing, Benjamin said. The industry went through significant restructuring that year. It did, Ethan agreed. And by the time it stabilized, I had a gap in my resume that made me less competitive. Plus, single parenthood doesn't exactly scream flexible employee. Daddy provides, Lily piped up proudly. He works really hard so we can have what we need. Benjamin's attention shifted to the little girl, his expression unreadable. Your mother isn't in the picture? Dad, Mara said sharply. That's personal. It's fine, Ethan said, though his hand had tightened on his fork. She left when Lily was 3. Decided parenthood wasn't for her. We haven't heard from her since. I see. Benjamin's tone suggested he saw quite a lot indeed, none of it particularly positive. That must be challenging, raising a child alone, working multiple jobs. I imagine there's not much time for socializing. The implication was clear. What are you doing spending time with my daughter? I make time for what matters, Ethan said, meeting Benjamin's gaze directly. Lily comes first, always. But teaching her that isolation isn't the same as protection means showing her how to connect with good people. Mara is good people. Mara is vulnerable, Benjamin countered, his voice hardening. She's been through trauma that most people can't begin to comprehend. She needs stability, not complications. Benjamin, Mara interjected, feeling heat rise in her face. Please don't talk about me like I'm not here. Then perhaps you'd like to explain what's happening, her father said, turning his attention to her. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've gotten involved with someone whose life is fundamentally unstable. Someone who, however well-meaning, cannot possibly provide the security you need. I'm not looking for someone to provide security, Mara said, her voice shaking. I'm looking for connection, for people who see me as human instead of broken. You're not broken, Benjamin insisted. You're healing, and that process requires protecting yourself from situations that could cause additional harm. Like friendship? Mara challenged. Like finally leaving my apartment and engaging with the world? That's harmful? Like attaching yourself to circumstances that will inevitably disappoint, Benjamin said. Ethan seems like a decent man, but decent doesn't pay bills. Decent doesn't provide the lifestyle you're accustomed to. Decent doesn't guarantee he won't leave when things get difficult. Ethan set down his fork with deliberate care. Mr. Ellison, with all due respect, you don't know anything about my character or my commitment. Yes, I'm struggling financially. Yes, my life is complicated, but I have never abandoned someone I care about, and I never will. You say that now, Benjamin said. But when the novelty wears off, when you realize that Mara's needs are complex and ongoing, will you still be so certain? Dad, stop, Mara said, tears burning in her eyes. You're being cruel. I'm being realistic, Benjamin corrected. Something you've avoided since this started. You've been hiding from the world for 3 years, and the first person who shows you kindness, you latch on to like he's your salvation. That's not healthy, Mara. That's desperation. The words hit like physical blows. Mara saw Ethan flinch, saw Lily's confusion as she looked between the adults, sensing tension she didn't understand. I think we should go, Ethan said quietly, standing. Lily, come on, sweetheart. But we didn't finish dinner, Lily protested. We'll get something on the way home, Ethan said, his voice gentle despite the anger Mara could see in his eyes. Say thank you to Mr. Ellison for having us. Thank you, Lily said dutifully, though she looked on the verge of tears herself. Ethan, wait, Mara started, standing as well. Your father is right, Ethan said, and the resignation in his voice broke something in Mara's chest. This was a mistake. I'm sorry for wasting your evening, Mr. Ellison. You're not wasting anything, Benjamin said, also standing. You're being sensible. Mara needs stability, structure, professional care, not a friendship that confuses sympathy with something more substantial. That's not what this is, Mara said desperately. Dad, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Benjamin interrupted. I understand that you're lonely and hurting, and you've latched onto the first person who didn't recoil from your scars. But Ethan can't fix what's broken, Mara. No one can, except you. The room fell silent, except for Lily's sniffles. Ethan's expression had gone hard, closed off in a way Mara had never seen. Come on, Lily, he said again, taking his daughter's hand. Ethan, please, Mara begged, following them toward the foyer. Don't leave like this. Your father made his position clear, Ethan said without looking at her. And honestly, maybe he has a point. Maybe you do need more than I can give. Maybe this whole thing was built on desperation and loneliness rather than anything real. That's not true, Mara said, tears streaming down her face now. You know that's not true. Ethan paused at the door, finally turning to face her. His eyes were filled with pain and frustration and something that looked like defeat. Do I? Because right now, standing in this house that probably costs more than I'll earn in my entire life, listening to your father list all the reasons I'm not good enough, I'm not sure what I know anymore. You're good enough, Mara insisted. You're more than good enough. Then prove it, Ethan said quietly. Tell your father that this matters, that we matter, that you're willing to fight for whatever this is becoming. Mara opened her mouth, wanting desperately to say the words, to stand up to her father the way Ethan deserved. But when she glanced back at the dining room, saw Benjamin standing there with that expression of disappointed concern, the words died in her throat. She started, then stopped. I need time. Something in Ethan's expression crumbled. "Yeah," he said softly. "I figured. Come on, Lily." "But Mara's crying," Lily said, pulling against her father's hand. "We can't leave when she's crying." "Sometimes we have to," Ethan said, his own voice rough with emotion. "Sometimes staying just makes things worse." They left, the door closing behind them with quiet finality. Mara stood in the foyer, tears blurring her vision, feeling like she'd just lost something precious because she'd been too afraid to hold on to it. "Mara," her father said from behind her, his voice gentle now. "I know that was difficult, but it was necessary. You'll understand eventually." "Understand what?" Mara turned on him, anger finally breaking through the paralysis. "That you think I'm so damaged that no one could possibly want me for who I am? That any kindness must be pity? That I should just accept isolation as my permanent state? That you deserve better than settling for someone because they tolerate your appearance," Benjamin said firmly. "You're my daughter. You're brilliant and accomplished and worthy of someone who can match your station." "I don't have a station anymore," Mara said bitterly. "I have scars and shame and 3 years of hiding. Ethan saw past all of that. He and Lily made me feel human again, and you just destroyed it because he doesn't meet your financial standards." "This isn't about money," Benjamin insisted. "It's about compatibility, stability." "It's about control," Mara interrupted. "It's about you deciding what's best for me without considering what I want, what I need. What you need is professional help, not a romantic relationship with someone fundamentally unsuited to your life." The words hung in the air like poison. Mara stared at her father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time, seeing the love there, yes, but also the limitations of it. He loved her, but his love came with conditions, with requirements she could never meet while she was busy trying to survive. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. "Mara, no, I'm done with this dinner, with this conversation, with letting you make decisions about my life." She grabbed her coat from the closet, her hands shaking. "I spent 3 years hiding because I was ashamed, because I believed I was too damaged to deserve connection. Ethan and Lily showed me that was wrong, and you just confirmed every fear they helped me overcome." "You're being emotional," Benjamin said. "Sleep on this. We'll talk when you've had time to think rationally." "I am being rational," Mara said. "For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly. And what I see clearly is that your protection became a prison. You kept me safe by keeping me isolated. Well, I'm done being safe. I'm done being protected. I'm going to live my life, Dad, with or without your approval." She walked out before he could respond, before she could lose her nerve. The night air was cold, sharp enough to cut through the numbness. Mara pulled out her phone, called for a car, then immediately dialed Ethan's number. It went to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Finally, she texted, "I'm sorry. You were right. I should have defended us, defended you. I was a coward, and I'm sorry." The message showed as delivered but not read. Mara stood on her father's circular driveway, watching for her car, feeling like she was standing at a crossroads that would determine the rest of her life. She could go back inside, apologize to her father, accept his version of safety, return to her penthouse and the comfortable isolation that asked nothing of her but also gave nothing back. Or she could fight. For herself, for Ethan, for the possibility that life after trauma could be more than just survival. The car arrived, a sleek black sedan that felt absurd given the emotional devastation of the evening. Mara climbed in and gave the driver Ethan's address instead of her own. "That's a different neighborhood," the driver said carefully. "You sure?" "I'm sure." The drive across the city felt eternal. Mara checked her phone obsessively, hoping for a response from Ethan. Nothing. She'd wounded him by hesitating, by not immediately defending their connection. She'd confirmed his worst fears about the distance between their worlds. When they reached his building, Mara paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the worn facade. This was where Ethan worked himself to exhaustion every day, where he raised his daughter with love and limited resources, where he'd built a life that her father had dismissed as inadequate. She climbed the stairs, the elevator still broken, and knocked on his door. No answer. She knocked again, harder. The door to the adjacent apartment opened, revealing an elderly woman with suspicious eyes. He's not home. Took his little girl out about an hour ago. Looked upset. Do you know where he went? Mara asked. The woman shrugged. Not my business. But if you're the reason he looked like that, maybe you should leave him alone. The words stung, but Mara couldn't argue with them. She'd hurt Ethan by not standing up to her father, by prioritizing her own fear over their connection. She deserved his anger, his silence, his decision to protect himself and Lily from further harm. But she also deserved a chance to make it right. Mara sat down in the hallway outside Ethan's apartment, her back against the wall, and settled in to wait. Hours passed. Other residents came and went, giving her curious looks but not commenting. Her phone buzzed periodically, her father calling, texting, each message a variation of the same theme. Come home. We need to talk. I'm worried. She didn't respond. For once, her father's worry would have to take second place to her own priorities. Finally, near midnight, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Ethan appeared carrying a sleeping Lily, his expression exhausted. When he saw Mara sitting there, he froze. What are you doing here? He asked quietly, clearly trying not to wake his daughter. Waiting for you, Mara said, standing slowly. Can we talk? It's late. Lily needs to get to bed. After then, please. I need to say something. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. Wait here. He disappeared into his apartment. Mara heard the sounds of bedtime routine, water running, soft voices, a door closing. When Ethan emerged 15 minutes later, he looked even more exhausted. You have 5 minutes, he said, leaning against his doorframe. I'm sorry, Mara said immediately. You were right. I should have defended you, defended us. I was scared, and I let that fear make me weak. Mara, let me finish, she interrupted. My father said terrible things tonight about you, about me, about what we are to each other. And instead of standing up to him, instead of choosing you, I hesitated. I let him make you feel like you weren't enough when the truth is you're more than I ever hoped to find. Ethan's expression remained guarded. Your father isn't entirely wrong. Our lives are incompatible. I can't give you what you're used to. I don't want what I'm used to, Mara said fiercely. I want what you've shown me, connection, authenticity, people who value me for who I am instead of what I look like or who my father is. I want Sunday dinners in your small apartment. I want Lily's artwork on the refrigerator. I want someone who looks at my scars and sees maps instead of damage. You want that now, Ethan said quietly. But when the reality sets in, when you realize what being with me actually means, will you still want it? Because I can't afford to take my daughter on trips, can't buy her the things other kids have, can barely keep the electricity on some months. That's my reality, Mara, and it's not going to change anytime soon. I don't care about money, Mara insisted. Easy to say when you have it, Ethan countered. Harder to live when you don't. Then let me help, Mara said. I have resources. No. Ethan's voice was firm. I won't be a project for you to fix. I won't take your money and pretend that doesn't change the dynamic between us. I need to stand on my own, Mara, for myself and for Lily. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant, and I appreciate it. But this is exactly what I was afraid of. The distance between our lives isn't just financial. It's fundamental. You think in terms of resources and solutions. I think in terms of survival and pride. Those don't mix well. Mara felt desperation clawing at her throat. So what are you saying? That it's over before it really began? Ethan sighed, running his hand through his hair. I'm saying I don't know. I'm saying tonight proved that this is more complicated than either of us wanted to admit. I'm saying I need time to think about whether I can give Lily what she needs while also trying to navigate whatever this is with you. Lily loves me, Mara said quietly. I know she does. Which is exactly why I have to be careful. If this falls apart, when your father's pressure becomes too much, when reality crushes the fantasy, she'll be heartbroken. And unlike you, she doesn't have years of therapy and resources to help her process that loss. The words hit like accusations because they carried truth. Mara had been thinking about her own loneliness, her own need for connection. She hadn't fully considered what it meant to become part of Lily's life, only to potentially disappear. I won't disappear, she said. I promise. Don't make promises you're not sure you can keep, Ethan said wearily. Go home, Mara. Get some sleep. We'll talk when we've both had time to process tonight. Ethan? Please, he said, and the exhaustion in his voice was profound. I can't do this right now. I'm tired, I'm angry, and I'm scared of making decisions I'll regret. Just give me some space. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to push, wanted to make him understand that she was serious about fighting for this. But she also recognized that pushing when someone asked for space was the opposite of respect. Okay, she said quietly. I'll give you space. But Ethan, I meant what I said. You're more than enough. And I'm going to prove that to you, even if it takes time. She turned to leave, made it 3 steps before Ethan's voice stopped her. Mara? She turned back, hope flaring. For what it's worth, he said softly. Tonight, before your father started in, I was happy. Seeing you in that world, knowing you were willing to share it with me and Lily, that meant something. It meant something to me too, Mara whispered. They stood there for a moment, 2 people separated by 3 feet of hallway and a chasm of uncertainty. Then Ethan stepped back into his apartment and gently closed the door. Mara descended the stairs slowly, her heart heavy with everything said and unsaid. When she reached the street, she called for another car and finally checked her messages. 17 missed calls from her father, 23 text messages, each one a variation on the theme of concern masking control. She typed out a response. I'm fine. I need space. Please respect that. The reply came immediately. We need to talk about tonight. No, we don't. You need to accept that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions, even if you don't agree with them. Mara, I'm trying to protect you. I know, but I don't need protection from connection. I need support in building the life I want. If you can't give me that, then we need to reevaluate our relationship. She sent the message and then did something she'd never done before. She turned off her phone. Completely. No more notifications, no more calls, no more parental pressure bleeding into every decision. The car arrived and Mara gave her penthouse address. As they drove through the late-night city, she thought about crossroads and choices, about courage and consequence. She'd spent 3 years letting fear make her decisions. Tonight, she'd let it happen again when she hesitated to defend Ethan. But she was learning. Slowly, painfully, she was learning that hiding was easier than fighting, but fighting was the only path to actually living. Tomorrow, she would figure out her next steps. Tomorrow, she would decide how to bridge the gap between who she'd been and who she wanted to become. Tomorrow, she would find a way to prove to Ethan and to herself that she was capable of choosing courage over comfort. But tonight, she would sit with the wreckage of her dinner party disaster and acknowledge that change was messy, that growth required breaking old patterns, that sometimes love demanded more bravery than she thought herself capable of possessing. The penthouse was dark and silent when she arrived, a monument to expensive solitude. Mara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights, thinking about Ethan somewhere out there in his small apartment, probably lying awake running through the same circular thoughts. She'd hurt him tonight by hesitating, but she'd also learned something crucial. She didn't want a life where hesitation was her default response. She didn't want to be the person who chose safety over substance, who let other people's expectations dictate her relationships. She wanted to be brave. And brave meant fighting for what mattered, even when, especially when, the fight was hardest. Mara pulled out her journal, a practice her therapist had suggested years ago that she'd abandoned when hiding became her full-time occupation. She wrote until her hand cramped, pouring out every feeling, every fear, every hope. And with each word, she felt something shifting, not resolution exactly, but commitment. Commitment to showing up, to trying, to becoming someone worthy of the connection Ethan and Lily had offered. She'd failed tonight, but failure wasn't final unless she let it be. Tomorrow, she would begin again. And she would keep beginning until eventually the brave choices outnumbered the fearful ones. It had to be enough. It was all she had to offer. The space Ethan requested stretched into days that felt like years. Mara honored his silence even as it carved hollows in her chest, even as every instinct screamed to show up at his door and demand he let her prove herself. She turned her phone back on the morning after the disaster dinner, braced for the onslaught of her father's concern disguised as control, but found instead a single message that made her breath catch. I've thought about what you said. You're right that my protection became prison. I'm sorry for that, but I stand by my concerns about Ethan's stability. We should talk when you're ready. I love you. Dad. It wasn't surrender, but it was acknowledgement. Benjamin Ellison admitting fault, even partially, was rarer than solar eclipses. Mara stared at the message for a long time before typing back a simple response. I love you too, but I need to figure this out on my own. She spent those silent days doing something she should have done years ago, actually working on herself rather than just surviving. She scheduled appointments with her therapist, increased the frequency to twice weekly. She researched scar revision treatments she'd been avoiding out of shame. She left her penthouse every day, even when anxiety screamed at her to stay hidden, forcing herself to exist in public spaces until the stairs felt less like knives and more like background noise. And she waited. For Ethan to process, to decide, to reach out or not reach out. The uncertainty was agonizing, but she was learning that sometimes love meant giving people space even when you desperately wanted to close the distance. On the fourth day, her phone rang. Not Ethan's number, but Marcus's. Mara's heart lurched as she answered. Marcus? Is everything okay? Is Ethan… Everyone's fine, Marcus said quickly. Physically, emotionally is a different story. Look, I'm calling because someone needs to, and Ethan's too stubborn to do it himself. What's going on? He's drowning, Marcus said bluntly. Between working himself to death and beating himself up about you and trying to keep it together for Lily, he's one bad day away from breaking completely. And before you ask, no, he didn't tell me to call you. He'd probably be pissed if he knew. But I've known him for 15 years, and I've never seen him like this. Mara's throat tightened. What can I do? He asked for space? Space doesn't mean abandonment, Marcus interrupted. It means respecting boundaries while making it clear you're not going anywhere. You want to prove to him that you're serious, that you can handle the reality of his life? Then show up. Not at his door demanding answers. Show up in the ways that actually matter. I don't understand. Thursday night, Ethan has to work a double shift, warehouse until 6, then delivery until 2 in the morning. He usually leaves Lily with us, but Elena's been sick, and I've got a work emergency. He's trying to figure out childcare he can't afford, and I can hear the panic in his voice every time we talk about it. Understanding dawned. You want me to watch Lily. I want you to offer. He might say no, probably will, actually, out of pride and fear, but offer anyway. Show him you're willing to be part of the complicated, unglamorous reality of his life. Not just Sunday lunches and cute moments, the hard stuff. After they hung up, Mara sat with the suggestion, turning it over like a puzzle piece she wasn't sure fit. Offering to help felt right, but it also felt like exactly the kind of thing Ethan had specifically rejected. Her resources solving his problems, creating an imbalance that would poison what they were trying to build. But then she thought about Lily, about a 6-year-old caught in the crossfire of adult complications. About Ethan working 18-hour days because he had no safety net. About the exhaustion that had been etched into his features even before the dinner disaster. Sometimes pride was less important than need. Sometimes accepting help was the bravest thing you could do. Mara picked up her phone and typed carefully. Marcus told me about Thursday. I know you asked for space, and I'm respecting that. But if you need someone to watch Lily, I'm available. No strings, no expectations. Just help when it's needed. She sent it before she could overthink, then immediately second-guessed everything. Was this overstepping? Presumptuous? Would Ethan see it as Marcus betraying his confidence? The response came 3 hours later. You talked to Marcus. He called me. He's worried about you. A longer pause. Then, I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's friendship. You said we're friends. Friends help each other. Friends don't usually come with trust funds and the ability to solve problems with money. The bitterness in that message stung, but Mara understood it. She typed back, I'm not offering money. I'm offering time. My time, watching your daughter so you can work without worrying. That's not about resources. That's about showing up. Another pause, longer this time. Mara imagined Ethan on the other end, wrestling with pride and practicality, fear and hope. Finally, Thursday, 5:30 to whenever I get back. If you're even 5 minutes late, the offer's off the table. I'll be there at 5:15. Mara. Yes? Thank you. Those two words carried weight beyond their simplicity, acknowledgement that he was letting her in, even fractionally, even against his better judgment. Mara held on to them like a lifeline. Thursday arrived with autumn rain that turned the city gray and cold. Mara showed up at Ethan's building at exactly 5:15, carrying a bag with activities she'd carefully selected, art supplies, a new butterfly book, materials for the science experiment she'd researched obsessively to make sure it was age-appropriate. When Ethan opened the door, he looked worse than she'd ever seen him. Exhaustion had carved deep lines around his eyes, and there was a defeated slump to his shoulders that spoke of someone running on fumes. "You came," he said, and she couldn't tell if he was relieved or disappointed. "I said I would." Lily appeared behind her father, her face lighting up with uncomplicated joy. "Mara, Daddy said you were coming, but I didn't know if it was real." "It's real," Mara said, crouching down to Lily's level. "I heard you and I get to hang out tonight. I brought supplies for a super cool experiment." "What kind of experiment?" "The kind where we make a volcano erupt, but only if your dad says it's okay to potentially make a mess." Ethan's expression softened slightly despite his obvious wariness. "A volcano is fine. Just maybe use the bathtub for the eruption part." "Noted." Mara stood, meeting his eyes. "Go, work. We'll be fine." "Bedtime is 8:30, Ethan said, shifting into instruction mode. "She needs to brush her teeth for 2 full minutes. She'll say she did it, but she won't have. No sugar after 7. If she says her stomach hurts, she's probably just anxious. Her nightlight has to stay on, and she sleeps with the stuffed elephant named Mr. Trunk." "Got it," Mara said, committing every detail to memory. "If there's any emergency, any at all, you call me immediately. I don't care what shift I'm on." "I will. Ethan, we'll be okay. I promise." He hesitated, clearly torn between necessity and 1,000 different fears. Then he kissed the top of Lily's head and grabbed his keys. "Be good for Mara," he told his daughter. Then to Mara. "Thank you, really." After he left, the apartment felt simultaneously larger and more intimate. This was Ethan's space, filled with evidence of his life. Bills stacked on the counter, Lily's schoolwork on the refrigerator, photos documenting 6 years of single parenthood. Mara felt like an intruder, but also like someone being trusted with something precious. "Can we do the volcano now?" Lily asked. "Absolutely. But first, have you had dinner?" "Daddy left mac and cheese, the box kind, not the fancy kind." They ate together at the small kitchen table, Lily chattering about school and her friend Sophie, who was back from vacation, and a boy named Tyler who'd pulled her hair, but she'd told the teacher. Mara listened with the attention she'd give to crucial information, understanding that these small details were the fabric of Lily's world. After dinner, they set up the volcano experiment in the bathtub, Lily bouncing with excitement as Mara explained the science behind baking soda and vinegar reactions. When the lava erupted in a foaming cascade, Lily shrieked with delight, and Mara felt something in her chest expand. Joy that wasn't about her own needs, but about making someone else happy. They cleaned up the mess together, Lily chattering nonstop about how she was going to tell Sophie about this tomorrow. Bath time followed, then pajamas, then the elaborate bedtime routine Ethan had described. Mara read 3 books, Lily's choice, about butterflies and fairies and a girl who discovered she had magic powers. "Mara?" Lily said as Mara was tucking her in with Mr. Trunk. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" The question caught Mara off guard. "What makes you think that?" "He's been sad, and you haven't been here. And when he talks about you, he gets this look like when I broke his favorite mug and felt really bad." Mara sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Lily's hair back from her forehead. "We're not fighting exactly. We're trying to figure some things out. Adult stuff that's complicated." "Is it because of your scars?" Lily asked with the bluntness that made adults uncomfortable. "No, sweetheart. It's because sometimes people care about each other but have to figure out how to make that work with the rest of their lives." "Do you care about Daddy?" "I do, very much." "Does he care about you?" "I think so. I hope so." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. "I want you to stay," she said finally. "Not just tonight. forever. You make Daddy smile, and he doesn't smile enough. The simple declaration made Mara's eyes burn with tears. I want to stay too, but that's not just my decision. Your dad has to want it too. He does, Lily said with absolute certainty. He's just scared. He gets scared about money and jobs and if he's doing okay with me. But when you're here, he's less scared. I can tell. Out of the mouths of children came truths adults spent years dancing around. Mara kissed Lily's forehead gently. Thank you for telling me that. Now get some sleep. Your dad will want to hear all about the volcano tomorrow. Will you be here when he gets home? I'll be here. Good, Lily said, already drifting off. I like when you're here. Mara stayed until Lily's breathing evened into sleep, then carefully retreated to the living room. She cleaned the kitchen, dishes Ethan had left in his rush to work, surfaces that needed wiping. She folded the laundry she found in a basket by the couch, recognizing the act as intimate, a crossing of invisible boundaries between casual friend and something more. Then she settled onto the worn couch and waited, watching the clock tick toward midnight, then 1, then 1:30. She researched scar revision techniques on her phone, read articles about single parenthood and economic stress, tried to understand the world Ethan navigated daily. At 2:17 in the morning, she heard keys in the lock. The door opened slowly, Ethan clearly trying not to make noise. When he saw Mara awake on his couch, he froze. You waited up, he said. I told Lily I'd be here when you got home. Didn't want to make myself a liar. Ethan closed the door behind him, set down his keys with careful quietness. He looked utterly spent, the kind of exhaustion that came from working 18 hours doing physical labor and emotional calculus in equal measure. How was she? He asked. Perfect. We made a volcano, took a bath, read books, talked about butterflies and magic. She's asleep with Mr. Trunk. Something in Ethan's expression cracked, relief mixed with something that looked dangerously close to tears. He sank into the chair across from Mara, dropping his head into his hands. I can't keep doing this, he said, his voice muffled. Working like this, constantly on the edge, never sure if I'm enough for her. It's killing me. Mara moved to sit on the floor in front of him, not touching, but close. You're more than enough. Lily knows that. Anyone who sees you two together knows that. Do they? Ethan looked up, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and unshed tears. Because from where I'm sitting, I'm one missed shift away from not making rent, one sick day from losing a job, one bad decision from failing her completely. And then you walk in with your resources and your stability and your ability to just solve problems that I can't even begin to address. And it makes me feel like maybe your father was right. Maybe I can't give you what you need. Maybe I can't even give Lily what she needs. Stop, Mara said firmly. Your worth isn't measured by your bank account. Lily is happy, healthy, loved beyond measure. You're giving her everything that actually matters. Love doesn't pay for college, Ethan said bitterly. Doesn't buy school supplies or fix broken appliances or cover medical bills. No, but it builds humans who know they're valued, who understand that their worth isn't conditional. Mara chose her next words carefully. Ethan, I'm not trying to solve your problems with money, but I am trying to understand them. And what I understand is that you're drowning because you won't let anyone throw you a rope. Because accepting the rope means admitting I'm drowning. You're already drowning. Everyone can see it. The only question is whether you're going to grab the help being offered or go under out of pride. Ethan laughed without humor. Is this the help being offered? You watching my kid so I can work myself to death? That's not solving the problem, Mara. That's just making it more comfortable. Then what would solve it? Mara challenged. Tell me what you need. I need a job that pays living wages. I need childcare I can afford. I need the engineering degree I spent 4 years earning to actually mean something again. I need a world that doesn't punish single parents for existing. Ethan's voice rose with frustration before he caught himself, glancing toward Lily's room. More quietly, I need things you can't give me. Maybe not, Mara conceded. But I can give you tonight. I can give you tomorrow night if you need it. I can give you moments where you don't have to carry everything alone. That's not charity, Ethan. That's what people do when they care about each other.
And when your father finds out you're playing nanny to my kid, when he realizes you're getting deeper into my life instead of backing away like he wants, what then? Then that's between me and my father, Mara said, not between you and me. Ethan studied her face, searching for something. You really think you can stand up to him after what happened at that dinner? I think I'm learning to, Mara said honestly. I failed that night. I hesitated when I should have fought, but I'm learning that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing to act despite the fear. And I choose this. I choose you and Lily, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Why? Ethan asked, and the vulnerability in that single word nearly broke her. Why would you choose this mess over the easy life your father wants for you? Because easy isn't the same as good, Mara said. Because the easy life had me hiding for 3 years, convinced I was too damaged to deserve connection. You showed me different. You and Lily looked at me and saw a person worth knowing. That's not something I'm willing to walk away from, no matter what my father thinks. They sat in silence for a long moment, the late hour pressing down around them. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared, Mara. Of this. Of us. Of what it means to let you in. Because if I let you in and you leave, when you leave, I don't know if I'll survive it, and I know for certain Lily won't. I'm scared too, Mara admitted. Of disappointing you, of not being strong enough, of my father's interference destroying what we're building. But I'd rather be scared and trying than safe and alone. Ethan reached out slowly, his hand finding hers in the dim light. What if we fail? Then we fail, Mara said, threading her fingers through his. But at least we'll fail having tried, having been brave enough to reach for something real. You make it sound simple. It's not simple at all. It's terrifying and complicated and probably going to be the hardest thing either of us has ever done. But Ethan, when I'm with you and Lily, I remember what it feels like to be alive instead of just surviving. That's worth fighting for. Ethan pulled her closer until she was kneeling between his legs, their faces inches apart. I can't promise you easy. I can't promise you stability or financial security or any of the things your father thinks you deserve. I don't want easy, Mara said. I want real. I want you. He kissed her then, exhaustion and hope and fear all tangled together. It was different from their first kiss. Less tentative, more certain, weighted with everything they'd survived in the days since the dinner. When they pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I'm still terrified, he admitted. Good. Me too. We can be terrified together. A sound from Lily's room made them both freeze, a small whimper that could signal awakening or just sleep-talking. They waited, listening, until silence resumed. I should let you get home, Ethan said quietly. It's late. Or I could stay, Mara offered. On the couch, just so you're not alone. Mara, as friends, she clarified quickly. Just two people who are tired of being alone, sharing space. Nothing that requires promises or definitions. Ethan considered this, clearly weighing propriety against loneliness. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but you take my bed. I'll sleep on the couch. Absolutely not. You just worked 18 hours. And you watched my daughter and waited up for me. We're not doing this thing where we argue about who's more tired. They compromised, Ethan taking his bed, Mara on the couch with the spare blanket he insisted she use. As he headed toward his room, he paused. Mara, thank you for tonight, for everything. Thank you for letting me, she replied. She lay awake on the couch for a long time after his door closed, listening to the sounds of the apartment settling, the distant traffic, the rhythm of two other people breathing in nearby rooms. This wasn't her penthouse with its silence and isolation. This was life, messy and complicated, and full of the beautiful, terrible vulnerability of connection. In the morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lily's laughter. When she emerged from the living room, she found Ethan attempting to make pancakes while Lily provided enthusiastic but unhelpful assistance. You're still here, Lily exclaimed when she saw Mara. Daddy, she stayed. I see that, Ethan said.
And when he looked at Mara, there was something different in his expression. Not quite surrender, but maybe acceptance, maybe hope. "I make terrible pancakes," he admitted. "Fair warning." "I make excellent pancakes," Mara countered. "Want help?" "Always," Ethan said quietly, and the word carried weight beyond breakfast. They cooked together in the small kitchen, Lily narrating their every move like a sports commentator. The pancakes turned out perfectly, golden and fluffy, exactly right. They ate at the tiny table, Lily between them, chattering about her plans for the day. And Mara felt it, that dangerous, precious thing called belonging. The sense that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was real in a way her isolated life had never been. After breakfast, as Mara prepared to leave, Lily hugged her fiercely. "Come back soon, okay?" "I will," Mara promised. Ethan walked her to the door, his hand briefly touching the small of her back, a gesture becoming familiar, becoming theirs. "You really stayed," he said softly. "I told you I would." "I know. I'm not used to people keeping promises." "Get used to it," Mara said, "because I plan on keeping showing up, as much as you'll let me. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard." He smiled then, tired but genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time in days. "Okay, then I'll try to let you. Fair warning, I'm not good at accepting help. Fair warning, I'm not good at taking no for an answer when I know I'm right." "This is going to be a disaster," Ethan said, but he was still smiling. "Probably," Mara agreed, "but it'll be our disaster." She left before the moment could tip into territory neither was quite ready for, carrying the warmth of belonging with her into the cool morning. Her phone buzzed as she reached the street, her father asking again if they could talk. This time, instead of ignoring it or deflecting, Mara called him back. "Mara?" Benjamin answered immediately. "Thank you for calling. Can we meet? There are things I need to say." "Okay," Mara said. "But Dad, before we do, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking for your permission anymore. I'm asking for your support. There's a difference." Silence on the other end, then. "I'm listening. I care about Ethan and Lily, and I'm going to keep seeing them, keep being part of their lives. Not because they're fixing me or because I'm desperate, because they matter to me. Because when I'm with them, I remember what it feels like to be human instead of hidden. And if I can't support that, then we'll have a relationship that's more limited than either of us wants," Mara said, surprised by her own certainty. "But I won't choose isolation to make you comfortable anymore." Another pause. Then Benjamin's voice, quieter than she'd ever heard it. "You sound different, stronger." "I'm trying to be." "The dinner was a disaster. I handled it poorly. Your young man, Ethan, he's clearly devoted to his daughter. I can respect that, even if I have concerns about his circumstances. His circumstances are temporary, his character isn't. I need you to see that." "I'm trying," Benjamin said. "Give me time. Let me meet them again, properly, without the interrogation and judgment. I can't promise I'll approve, but I can promise I'll try to understand." It wasn't everything Mara wanted, but it was more than she'd expected. "Okay, I'll talk to Ethan about it. But Dad, this is on his timeline, not yours. He gets to decide when he's ready." "Fair enough. I love you, Mara, even when I'm terrible at showing it." "I love you too. We'll figure this out." After she hung up, Mara stood on the sidewalk, feeling the weight of multiple worlds pulling at her from different directions. Her father's expectations, Ethan's pride, her own desperate need for connection, Lily's uncomplicated affection. Somehow, she had to find a way to honor all of it without losing herself in the process. But for now, she had proof that showing up mattered, that keeping promises built trust, that courage could be practiced in small increments until it became habit. She'd stayed when Ethan needed her. She'd stood up to her father, gently but firmly. She'd chosen authenticity over comfort. It was a start. And sometimes, a start was all you needed to believe the rest might be possible. The weeks that followed felt like learning to walk on new legs, unsteady but determined, each step building confidence even when the ground felt uncertain beneath them. Mara showed up for Lily twice more when Ethan's impossible schedule demanded it, and each time she stayed a little longer, fit a little more naturally into the rhythms of their life. Ethan was learning to accept her presence without interrogating her motives, and Mara was learning that love sometimes looked like folding laundry and checking homework rather than grand gestures. But the situation with her father remained unresolved, a storm cloud on the horizon that threatened to break at any moment. Benjamin had been patient, more patient than Mara had expected, but she knew his restraint had limits. 3 weeks after their phone conversation, those limits ran out. Mara was leaving Ethan's building on a Sunday evening, her heart full from an afternoon of board games and laughter, when she found her father's car parked on the street. Not a driver. Benjamin himself standing beside the sedan with his arms crossed, looking profoundly out of place in this working-class neighborhood. "Dad," Mara said, anxiety spiking, "what are you doing here?" "You wouldn't arrange a proper meeting," Benjamin said, "so I arranged one myself. You can't just show up." "I can when my daughter is spending all her time in a part of town where her car is worth more than every vehicle on the block combined. We need to talk, Mara. Really talk." Before Mara could respond, Ethan appeared in the building's doorway, Lily beside him. He must have been watching from the window, must have seen Benjamin arrive. The look on his face was carefully neutral, but Mara knew him well enough now to recognize the tension in his jaw, the protective stance as he moved slightly in front of his daughter. "Mr. Ellison," Ethan said evenly. "Unexpected visit." "Mr. Brooks?" Benjamin's tone was equally measured. "I was hoping we could have a conversation. All of us. Like adults." "Daddy? Is that the man from the big house?" Lily whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The one who was mean?" Ethan's hand tightened on his daughter's shoulder. "Lily, inside. Now." "But, please, sweetheart, this is adult conversation time." Lily looked like she wanted to argue, but something in her father's voice stopped her. She retreated inside with obvious reluctance, and Ethan descended the steps slowly, positioning himself between Benjamin and the building like he was guarding something precious. "If you're here to insult me again," Ethan said quietly, "save your breath. I've had a long day, and I'm not in the mood." "I'm not here to insult anyone," Benjamin said. "I'm here because the situation has changed, and we need to address it before it becomes a bigger problem." Mara felt ice settle in her stomach. "What situation?" Benjamin pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then held it up. On the screen was a photo. Mara and Ethan and Lily in the park 2 weeks ago, the three of them laughing at something, looking for all the world like a family. The photo had been taken from a distance, clearly without their knowledge. "This appeared on a gossip blog yesterday," Benjamin said, along with some very creative speculation about the mysterious, reclusive Mara Ellison emerging from hiding with a new boyfriend and his daughter. By tomorrow, it'll be in actual news outlets. By next week, you'll have photographers camped outside this building. Ethan's face had gone pale. "You've got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," Benjamin said. "Mara, you're the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the city, and you've been hidden from public view for 3 years. Your reappearance is news. Your connection to—" He gestured at Ethan. "Someone outside our usual social circles is the kind of story tabloids dream about." "So what?" Mara said, anger rising. "So people know I'm seeing someone. That's not exactly scandalous." "It is when they start digging," Benjamin said grimly. "When they find out about Ethan's employment history, his financial struggles, his ex-wife who abandoned them. When they turn this into some kind of fairy tale narrative about the scarred heiress and the struggling single father. They'll make your life hell, Mara. Both your lives." "Maybe we can handle it," Mara said, though her voice wavered. "Can you?" Benjamin turned to Ethan. "Can you handle photographers following your daughter to school? Reporters asking her questions about her mother? Your private life becoming public entertainment?" Ethan's silence was answer enough. Mara saw the fear in his eyes, the protective instinct warring with the reality of the situation. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Benjamin continued. "Not that Ethan isn't a decent person, but that the complications of your world would crash into his life and destroy the very thing you're trying to build. You want to protect him? Then you need to think strategically about how to manage this." "Manage this how?" Mara demanded. "By walking away? By proving that you were right all along?" "By being smart," Benjamin said. by recognizing that privacy is a luxury you can afford to give him, even if you can't have it yourself. No, Ethan said suddenly, his voice rough. He was looking at Mara with an expression that broke her heart. He's right. Mara, I can't subject Lily to this. I can't have her life turned into a circus because her dad is dating someone whose last name comes with paparazzi. So what are you saying? Mara asked, tears already starting. I'm saying maybe we need to step back before this gets worse, before Lily gets hurt. She'll be more hurt if I disappear, Mara protested. Ethan, we've been building something real. You can't just throw that away because of some photographs. It's not just photographs, Ethan said, frustration bleeding through his careful control. It's the reality of who you are and who I am. I was fooling myself thinking we could bridge that gap. Your father tried to tell me at that dinner, and I didn't listen because I wanted to believe. He stopped, running his hand through his hair. It doesn't matter what I wanted to believe. What matters is protecting my daughter. I can protect her too, Mara said desperately. Ethan, please, don't do this. Mr. Brooks, Benjamin said, his voice surprisingly gentle. I understand your instinct to retreat, but I'm not here to break you apart. I'm here because I finally understand that fighting this is only going to hurt my daughter more, and despite our differences, I don't want that. Both Mara and Ethan stared at him. What are you saying? Mara asked. I'm saying I was wrong, Benjamin admitted, the words clearly difficult. About a lot of things. I thought protecting you meant isolating you. I thought the right man for you would come from the right background, have the right credentials, move in the right circles. But watching you these past weeks, seeing you actually live instead of just survive, I realized you were right. I turned protection into prison. Dad, let me finish, Benjamin said. Ethan, at that dinner, I said some things that were unfair and cruel. I questioned your stability, your commitment, your worth as a partner for my daughter. I was wrong to do that. Not because your financial situation has changed, it hasn't, but because I was measuring worth with the wrong metrics. Ethan's expression remained guarded. What metrics should you have used? The fact that my daughter smiles now, Benjamin said simply. The fact that she leaves her apartment without prompting, engages with the world, allows herself to be vulnerable. The fact that in 3 weeks with you, she's shown more healing than in 3 years of the best therapy money could buy. That's worth more than any bank balance. Mara felt tears spilling over, unable to stop them. Her father, proud, stubborn Benjamin Ellison, was admitting fault in a way she'd never witnessed. But worth doesn't protect Lily from photographers, Ethan said quietly. It doesn't change the fact that being with Mara comes with complications I'm not equipped to handle. What if you didn't have to handle them alone? Benjamin asked. What if, instead of seeing me as an obstacle, you saw me as a resource? I have lawyers who specialize in privacy protection, security teams who can keep your daughter safe, PR people who can control the narrative instead of letting tabloids write it for you. I don't want your charity, Ethan said, the old pride flaring. It's not charity, Benjamin countered. It's investment in my daughter's happiness. And believe me, I'm selfish enough that this is entirely self-serving. Mara is the only family I have. If keeping her happy means helping you protect your daughter, then that's what I'll do. You're serious, Ethan said slowly. You're actually saying you'll support this. I'm saying I'll stop fighting it, Benjamin clarified. I still think you and Mara come from fundamentally different worlds. I still worry about long-term compatibility, but I also recognize that those are my issues to work through, not obstacles I should place in your path. If you can make my daughter happy, if you can give her the life she deserves, then the least I can do is make that possible instead of impossible. Mara was crying openly now, unable to believe what she was hearing. Ethan looked equally stunned, his defenses crumbling in the face of unexpected support. What would this actually look like? Ethan asked carefully. This help you're offering. First, we control the story, Benjamin said, shifting into business mode. We don't hide, but we manage disclosure. A carefully written statement acknowledging that Mara is in a relationship, asking for privacy, making it clear that harassment will be met with legal action. We make you boring instead of scandalous. And Lily? Ethan's voice cracked slightly on his daughter's name. We protect her completely, Benjamin said firmly. No photos, no information, no comment. Anyone who tries to involve a child gets destroyed legally and financially. I don't make idle threats, Mr. Brooks. If someone goes after your daughter, they'll discover exactly how vindictive I can be." Despite everything, Ethan laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "You know, when Mara first told me who you were, I looked you up, read about your business practices. You have a reputation for being ruthless." "I am ruthless," Benjamin agreed, "when it comes to protecting what's mine. And whether I like it or not, you're apparently part of that category now." "I don't know what to say," Ethan admitted. "Say you'll give this a real chance," Benjamin said. "Say you'll let us help instead of trying to carry everything alone. Say you'll trust that maybe, just maybe, this doesn't have to end in disaster." Ethan looked at Mara, really looked at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes, fear and hope, pride and pragmatism, the desperate desire to believe warring with the lifetime of experience that said things like this didn't work out for people like him. "Mara," he said quietly, "what do you want?" "I want you," she said without hesitation. "I want Lily. I want Sunday dinners in your cramped apartment and helping with homework and being part of your life. Not the sanitized version, not the version that fits my father's expectations. Your actual life with all its complications. Even when those complications include paparazzi and public scrutiny and people questioning your choices." "Especially then," Mara said, "because choosing you, choosing us, in the face of all that proves this is real. That I'm not with you because I'm desperate or damaged or looking for someone to fix me. I'm with you because you see me as human instead of broken, because Lily loves me without condition, because when I'm with you I remember what it feels like to want to live instead of just survive." "We're going to fail at this," Ethan said, but there was something different in his voice now, not defeat, but acknowledgement. "We're going to mess up and hurt each other and face obstacles we can't predict." "Probably," Mara agreed, "but we'll fail together. And maybe we'll also succeed together. We won't know unless we try." Ethan turned to Benjamin. "If we do this, if I accept your help, I need to be clear about something. I'm not going to be your project. I'm not going to let you remake me into someone you think is more suitable for your daughter. I am who I am, a broke single dad working 3 jobs and doing my best. If that's not good enough, then we end this now before Lily gets more attached." "It's enough," Benjamin said, and to Mara's shock, he extended his hand. "More than enough. If it makes my daughter look at me the way she's looking at you right now." Ethan took his hand, and Mara felt something shift, not resolution, but possibility. The beginning of something new built on honesty instead of pretense. "I should talk to Lily," Ethan said. "Explain what's happening before she hears it somewhere else." "Can I be there?" Mara asked. "When you tell her?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, you should be there. This affects you too." They went back inside together, leaving Benjamin on the street with a promise to meet later that week to discuss logistics. Inside the apartment, Lily was sitting on the couch pretending to read, but clearly listening for their return. "Is everything okay?" she asked immediately. "Is Mara leaving forever?" "Because Sophie's mom left forever, and Sophie cries sometimes, and I don't want that to happen." "Come here, Butterfly," Ethan said, sitting down and pulling his daughter onto his lap. Mara sat beside them, close enough to be part of the conversation, but giving them space. "Remember how we talked about how some people are famous and lots of strangers want to know about their lives?" Ethan began. "Like the princess in that movie?" "Kind of like that. Well, Mara's father is very important, which makes Mara kind of famous. And because we're friends with her, because she's important to us, some people are going to want to know about us too." Lily processed this with visible concentration. "Are they going to take pictures?" "Probably," Ethan admitted, "and ask questions. And it might feel weird or scary sometimes. But we're going to have help keeping you safe. Mara's father, he's going to make sure nobody bothers you or makes you uncomfortable." "Is he still mean?" Despite the seriousness of the conversation, both adults smiled. "He's trying to be less mean," Mara said. "He's learning, just like all of us." "Okay," Lily said with the flexibility of childhood. "So people will take pictures, but I'll be safe and you're not leaving?" "I'm not leaving," Mara confirmed. "And Daddy's okay with that?" Ethan pulled both of them closer, his daughter, and the woman he was learning to love, despite every reason to protect himself. Daddy's okay with that. Lily seemed satisfied with this explanation and immediately moved on to asking if they could have ice cream, because apparently emotional conversations required frozen treats. As Ethan went to check if they actually had any, Lily cuddled against Mara. "I'm glad you're staying," she whispered. "You make our family bigger." Our family. Two words that carried weight beyond their simplicity, acknowledgement that Mara belonged here, was claimed by this small person without reservation or condition. "I'm glad too," Mara whispered back. "So glad." The following weeks were a masterclass in managing publicity with Benjamin's considerable resources behind them. The statement his PR team crafted was perfect, acknowledging the relationship while firmly establishing boundaries around privacy. When photographers did show up outside Ethan's building, security personnel Benjamin hired made it clear that harassment would have consequences. The story ran its course through news cycles as these things did. Initial interest, speculation, then fading as newer scandals emerged. There were unkind articles questioning Mara's judgment, think pieces about class differences, amateur psychology about damaged people seeking redemption through romance. But there were also surprisingly supportive responses. People who saw the photos and recognized authentic connection, who appreciated the simple story of two people choosing each other despite complications. Through it all, Ethan and Mara kept showing up. For each other, for Lily, for the life they were building together. Ethan continued working his multiple jobs, but Benjamin quietly used his connections to get Ethan's resume in front of engineering firms that were actually hiring. When an offer came, a real position with benefits and salary that meant Ethan could quit his other jobs, he almost turned it down out of pride before Mara reminded him that accepting help wasn't the same as being rescued. "You earned this," she'd said firmly. "Your degree, your experience, your skills, those are yours. My father just opened a door that should never have been closed. What you do once you walk through it is entirely up to you." 6 months after that disastrous first dinner, Benjamin hosted a second gathering. This one was different, smaller, more intimate. Marcus and Elena were there, providing buffer and support. Lily was there, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself that had butterflies on it because of course it did. And Ethan and Mara were there together, not hiding, not apologizing, simply present. The evening was far from perfect. Benjamin still occasionally said things that revealed the class assumptions he was working to unlearn. Ethan still bristled at perceived condescension, but there was effort on both sides, genuine attempt to bridge divides that were real but not insurmountable. After dinner, while the others were occupied with dessert, Benjamin pulled Mara aside onto the terrace. "You look happy," he observed. "I am happy," Mara said. "Genuinely, fully happy, for the first time in years." "I'm sorry I almost destroyed that," Benjamin said quietly. "I thought I was protecting you. I see now I was protecting myself from the fear of losing you to a world I didn't understand." "You're not losing me," Mara assured him. "You're just sharing me. There's a difference." "He's good for you," Benjamin admitted. "I still don't entirely understand what you see in him, but I don't need to understand. I just need to accept that you see something that makes you want to fight for it." "I see someone who looked at my scars and saw maps," Mara said. "Someone who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Someone who's teaching his daughter that worth isn't measured in money or status, but in how you treat people when nobody's watching." Benjamin nodded, looking out over the manicured gardens of his estate. "Your mother would have liked him," he said finally. "She always said I was too concerned with appearances, too focused on what people would think instead of what actually mattered." It was the first time in years he'd mentioned Mara's mother without the conversation ending in tears. Mara slipped her hand into his. "She'd be proud of both of us," Mara said, "for learning to choose people over pride." Inside, Lily's laughter rang out, pure and uncomplicated. Through the window, Mara could see Ethan playing some kind of game with her, his face relaxed in a way it hadn't been when she'd first met him. Marcus and Elena were watching with obvious affection, two people who'd supported Ethan through his worst years and were now witnessing his best. "Come on," Mara said to her father. "Let's go back inside." "In a moment," Benjamin said. He pulled something from his pocket, a small box that made Mara's breath catch. "I bought this for your mother 35 years ago, was going to give it to her on our 20th anniversary,
but she died before we got there. I've been holding on to it, waiting for the right moment, the right person." He opened the box to reveal a simple ring, elegant in its understatement, beautiful without being ostentatious. "I'm not suggesting you rush into anything," Benjamin continued, "but when the time comes, if the time comes, I want you to have this. Not because I'm trying to control your relationship, but because I want you to know I support it, genuinely support it." Mara took the box with shaking hands. "Dad, you don't have to use it," Benjamin said quickly. "If Ethan wants to choose his own ring, I'll understand. But I wanted you to know it's here, that I'm here, that whatever you need to build the life you want, I'll help provide." Mara hugged her father tightly, this complicated man who loved her in the only way he knew how and was learning to love her better. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for learning, for trying." "Thank you for being patient with an old man's fears," Benjamin replied. They went back inside together, rejoining the gathering. Ethan looked up as they entered, a question in his eyes that Mara answered with a smile. Later, she would tell him about the ring, about her father's blessing. But for now, she just wanted to exist in this moment, surrounded by people who loved her, accepted her, saw her as human instead of damaged. The months continued to pass. Ethan started his new engineering position and slowly began to rebuild the financial stability he'd lost. He didn't move from his apartment immediately. That was home, where he'd raised Lily, and he wasn't ready to abandon it just because he could afford better. But he did start saving, planning, thinking about a future that extended beyond survival. Mara underwent scar revision surgery, a procedure she'd been avoiding out of shame and fear. Ethan held her hand before the operation and was there when she woke up, telling her she was beautiful in both states, that the scars didn't define her, but that healing them was her choice to make. The results were subtle. The scars would never disappear completely, but they softened, became less angry, allowed her face more mobility. More importantly, the surgery represented Mara reclaiming agency over her body, choosing to address the physical damage not because she was ashamed, but because she wanted to. Lily started calling Mara by a name she'd created herself, not Mom, because she understood that wasn't accurate, but Mara Mom, a hybrid that acknowledged the complicated reality of their relationship. The first time she used it, Ethan had tears in his eyes. "You don't have to," he told his daughter gently. "Mara is Mara. She doesn't need another title." "But I want to," Lily had insisted, "because she does mom things. She reads to me and helps with homework and makes sure I eat vegetables. That's mom stuff." Mara had excused herself to cry in the bathroom, overwhelmed by the casual way this child had claimed her, integrated her into family structure without requiring permission or formal definition. A year after that first meeting in the cafe, Ethan took Mara back to the same place. They sat at the same table, drinking the same drinks, and Mara marveled at how different everything felt. "I was so scared that day," she admitted. "Walking through that door, facing all those stairs. If you hadn't stood up, you would have left," Ethan finished, "and I would have regretted it for the rest of my life." "Why did you do it?" Mara asked. "Really, you'd never seen me before. You didn't know me. What made you take that risk?" Ethan considered the question seriously. "I saw someone who looked the way I felt," he said finally. "Isolated, convinced they didn't deserve connection, ready to run from the possibility of it. And I thought, maybe if I can be brave for her, I can be brave for myself too. Maybe if I can offer kindness without expecting anything in return, I can remember what it feels like to be human instead of just a provider or a failure or any of the other labels I had accepted." "You were never a failure," Mara said fiercely. "I felt like one," Ethan corrected gently. "Lost my job, lost my wife, could barely keep my kid fed on what I was earning. That does things to your self-worth. But then you walked into my life, and suddenly I had a reason to stand up straighter. Because if someone like you could be brave enough to stay, maybe I could be brave enough to let you." Mara reached across the table, taking his hand. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a small box. Ethan's eyes widened. "Mara, it's not what you think," she said quickly. "Or maybe it is, but not in the traditional way. Just open it." Inside was a simple silver band, nothing expensive, nothing ostentatious, just a ring that represented a promise. "I know we've talked about taking things slow," Mara said. about not rushing into definitions or expectations. But Ethan, you and Lily are my family. You're the people I want to come home to, the ones I want to build a life with. This isn't me asking you to marry me. Not yet, not until you're ready. This is me promising that I'm not going anywhere, that I choose this, choose you, choose us. Every day, for as long as you'll have me. Ethan took the ring from the box with shaking hands. What if I want to marry you? He asked quietly. What if I'm ready now? Mara's breath caught. Are you? I am scared, Ethan admitted.
Of failing you, of not being enough, of all the ways this could go wrong. But I'm more scared of living without you, of teaching Lily that fear should win over hope, of letting the best thing that ever happened to me slip away because I was too proud or too afraid to hold on tight. He stood up, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. Several cafe patrons noticed, started watching with the kind of attention that would have paralyzed Mara a year ago, but now just felt like witness to something beautiful. Mara Ellison, Ethan said, you walked into my life when I was convinced I didn't deserve good things. You looked at my daughter and saw a possibility instead of burden. You looked at my poverty and saw character instead of failure. You looked at me, really looked, and saw someone worth fighting for. I don't have much to offer except 3 jobs. I'm slowly consolidating into one, an apartment that's too small, and a 6-year-old who already loves you like you've been here forever. But if you'll have me, have us, I promise to spend every day proving you made the right choice. Mara was crying openly now, not caring who saw. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. The cafe erupted in applause as Ethan slid the ring onto her finger. It was imperfect, slightly too loose, requiring resizing, but it was theirs, chosen in a moment of spontaneous courage rather than careful planning. I have a ring too, Ethan admitted as they sat back down, both grinning like idiots. From your father, actually. He gave it to me 3 months ago, told me it was your mother's, said I should use it when I was ready. I've been carrying it around ever since, waiting for the perfect moment. This is the perfect moment, Mara said. Every moment with you is perfect. Even the messy ones? Especially the messy ones. They planned a small wedding, just family and close friends, nothing that required the kind of publicity management that had marked their first year together. Benjamin walked Mara down the aisle with tears in his eyes, this man who'd learned that protecting someone sometimes meant letting them risk hurt. Marcus stood as Ethan's best man, Elena as Mara's maid of honor, and Lily served as flower girl, scattering petals with the kind of enthusiasm that resulted in most of them ending up in her hair. The ceremony itself was simple. No lengthy speeches, no elaborate production, just 2 people promising to choose each other, to keep choosing each other through whatever complications life threw at them. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan cupped Mara's face gently, scarred side and unscarred side both, and kissed her with a tenderness that acknowledged everything they'd survived to reach this moment. The reception was held in Benjamin's Gardens, but the vibe was entirely different from that first disastrous dinner. This time, there was laughter and joy and the easy comfort of people celebrating something they genuinely believed in. Marcus gave a speech that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. Elena read a poem about butterflies and transformation that she'd written specifically for the occasion. Benjamin stood up and, in a voice rough with emotion, welcomed Ethan and Lily officially into the family. And Lily, when given the microphone, simply said, "I'm really glad Mara stayed. She makes the best volcanoes, and she loves my daddy, and she says I can have a puppy when we move into the bigger house." "We never agreed to a puppy," Ethan protested, but he was smiling. "We're discussing it," Mara amended, and the crowd laughed. As the sun set and string lights illuminated the gathering, Ethan pulled Mara onto the dance floor. Neither of them were particularly good dancers, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the way he held her, secure, certain. Home. "Thank you for standing up that day," Mara said quietly. "In the cafe. For not looking away." "Thank you for staying," Ethan replied. "For being brave enough to let yourself be seen." "We saved each other," Mara said. "No," Ethan corrected gently. "We gave each other permission to save ourselves. That's better." Across the garden, Lily was teaching Benjamin how to do some kind of dance she'd learned in school. The sight of the stern businessman attempting to follow a 6-year-old's instructions was both absurd and beautiful, proof that people could change, that love could bridge seemingly impossible distances. The photographers who'd once hounded them had moved on to newer stories. The gossip columns that had speculated about their relationship had declared them boring, happily married, disgustingly stable, no drama to report. It was the best review Mara could imagine. Months turned into years. They moved into a house together, not a mansion, but something comfortable, with a yard for the puppy Lily eventually wore them down about, and space for Ethan's home office and a room Mara converted into an art studio. She'd started painting again, something she hadn't done since before the fire, finding that creating beauty helped heal the parts of her that had felt irreparably broken. Ethan thrived in his engineering position, his skills and dedication earning him promotions and recognition. He still sometimes struggled with imposter syndrome, still had moments where he couldn't quite believe this was his life. But Mara was there to remind him that he'd earned every bit of it, that worth wasn't measured in starting position, but in how far you traveled and who you brought along for the journey. Lily grew into a bright, compassionate girl who collected butterflies and asked questions that made adults think, and loved with the kind of wholehearted certainty that came from being loved the same way. She called Benjamin Grandpa Ben and had him wrapped around her finger, using her powers for good by regularly convincing him to donate to causes she learned about in school. And Mara learned to live instead of just survive. She still had hard days, moments when old shame crept in or new situations triggered anxiety. But she had people now, a support system that caught her when she stumbled and celebrated when she soared. She'd gone from isolated to integrated, from hidden to whole, from convinced she was broken to understanding she was simply human. On their 5th anniversary, sitting on the porch of their home while Lily played in the yard with the dog and the sunset painted everything gold, Ethan turned to Mara with a question. "Do you ever regret it? Walking into that cafe that day?" "Never," Mara said without hesitation. "Best decision I ever made." "Even when it's hard? Even when we fight or struggle or face obstacles?" "Especially then," Mara said, "because the hard moments prove this is real, that we're not hiding from life or each other, but actually living it together." Ethan pulled her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter chase butterflies in the fading light. This wasn't a fairy tale. There was no perfect ending, no moment when all struggles ceased and happiness became constant. But it was real and messy and filled with the kind of profound, ordinary love that sustained people through decades rather than just dramatic moments. Mara thought about that frozen girl in the cafe, convinced she didn't deserve connection, ready to run from the possibility of it. She thought about Ethan, exhausted and overwhelmed, choosing kindness anyway. She thought about Lily, seeing maps instead of monsters. She thought about Benjamin, learning that love sometimes meant letting go of control. So many small choices had led to this moment, each one a chance to choose courage over comfort, connection over isolation, hope over fear. None of them had been easy. All of them had been worth it. "I love you," Mara said into the gathering dusk. "I love you too," Ethan replied. "Thank you for giving me a chance to." Lily ran over then, breathless and joyful, climbing onto Mara's lap with the casual certainty of belonging. "Did you see? I almost caught a butterfly. It landed right on my hand and everything." "I saw," Mara said, wrapping her arms around the girl who'd helped teach her what unconditional acceptance looked like. "It was beautiful." "You're beautiful," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Even with your scars. Especially with your scars. Because they're part of your story, and your story is how you met Daddy, and that's how I got a Mara mom." Out of the mouths of children came wisdom that adults spent lifetimes trying to articulate. Mara kissed the top of Lily's head, overwhelmed with gratitude for this life she'd almost been too afraid to reach for. The room that had looked away that cold afternoon 5 years ago had become a distant memory, replaced by spaces filled with love and laughter and the beautiful complexity of human connection. Mara's scars hadn't disappeared. They were still there, still visible, still part of her story. But they no longer defined her. They were simply evidence that she'd survived something terrible and chosen to keep living anyway. And the hand that had reached toward her in that cafe, Ethan's hand offering connection without condition, had never let go. Through publicity storms and family drama, through financial stress and personal growth, through everyday challenges and extraordinary moments, they'd held on to each other. Not because they were perfect, not because love had solved all their problems, but because they'd chosen each other, kept choosing each other, day after ordinary day. That was enough. It was everything. As darkness fell and stars emerged, the family headed inside together. 3 people bound not by biology or circumstance, but by the conscious, courageous decision to build something real in a world that often settled for less. Mara paused at the threshold, looking back at the yard, the house, the life she'd built from the ashes of trauma and isolation. Ethan waited beside her, patient as always, ready to move forward when she was ready. "Thank you," she whispered, to him, to the universe, to the version of herself that had been brave enough to stay in that cafe 5 years ago. Then she stepped inside, into warmth and light, and the imperfect, beautiful reality of home. The door closed behind them with quiet finality, not an ending, but a continuation, the next chapter in a story that would keep writing itself for years to come, one small, brave choice at a time.